Alrighty then. Let's check out Rockfin. Thank you for starting on time, Rockfin. Let's check out Rumble. Of course, Rumble will be an issue. Boy, I tell you. Rumble, Rumble, Rumble. Oh, it says you are connected. Rumble, we're going to have to come back to you. I don't know what your issue is, but yeah. Like, what the hell? This is the second time this has happened with Rumble, man. We'll have to come back in and check you out. Anywho, here we go.
I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. Salvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right, guys. Happy Tuesday. Welcome back. Yes, I am back from break. Missed you guys on Sunday, but we're back at it. I have a pretty interesting show tonight. I actually have my comrade JB here from RBN. He's going to join me tonight to discuss one of the stories that I have listed. So I'm going to go ahead and actually jump right in. We're going to get started with the thumbnail here, and then I'll bring JB in. So shout out to all of you watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and I don't know what happened with Rumble, but we'll figure that out. But shout out to all of you and welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you are new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays and Fridays, and you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Sunday. And let's go ahead and jump right into this thumbnail because I want to go ahead and bring in JB. Tonight we are discussing, believe it or not, we have another presidential candidate, Dr. Shiva, who actually ran for office before here. He's local to me here in Massachusetts. He actually had a conversation about his campaign with Kim Iversen. We're going to cover that story tonight. We're also going to discuss Chris Hedges debunks Khanna on the economy. This is huge. I can't wait to dive into that story. We're also going to discuss, if you have not heard, Marianne Williamson's staff alert. There has been an article that was written recently, apparently while it was out on vacation. More staffers have come forward about Marianne Williamson's campaign. JB and I are going to dive into that. And last but not least, breaking news coming from Pakistan. Imran Khan has been arrested. And I'll get into that story as well. But first and foremost, let me go ahead and bring in my comrade JB. JB, welcome. What's up?
Good to see you here and good to see your audience. They're all here in and accounted for. Some of the people who I've seen on my channel. So good to see some of y'all on here.
That's right. That's right.
Sabby and JB show on Sabby Sabs.
Back at it. For those who don't know, so JB is one of my comrades from Revolutionary Blackout Network, and JB and I have a show on RBN called the Sabby and JB Show, where we usually cover like pop culture to give you like a break from electoral politics, just to be honest. But JB also has his own channel. If you want to talk a little bit about that, JB, before we dive in.
Sure. Yeah. So I have a channel on YouTube called the JB Font Channel. If you guys would like to, you guys can also go there as well. I do news and interviews similar to Sabby Sabs. Yes, I'm copying off of Sabby. Why? Because you gotta imitate the best. So, but I do that as well. I also take things from a different perspective as a gay black male who is also disabled, and I also implement that into it. And so it's still from a left perspective, but I do that on my channel. And I also do readings of different books as well on my channel. One of the books that I'm reading is called Laziness Does Not Exist by Dr. Yvonne Price. I do that reading. And I'm also in process of reading Asada Shakur's autobiography on my channel as well. So I do those too. So if you guys ever want to, you guys can also go to my channel, and you guys can also follow me on Twitter at JBFont2.
That's right. Eric, when you get a chance, if you can put the link in the chat for JB's channel so people can follow him as well. JB and I are going to talk about this story with Marianne Williamson. So I think, JB, you might have been the one that sent me the article, and I was like, oh boy.
Actually, no, you sent it to me. You saw it first, and now you were like, I was like, whoa.
Okay, yeah. I forget sometimes. But we went into this article. This is not the first time that a staffer has come forward to complain about Marianne Williamson's campaign. This time, however, it's not one person. It appears there are 7 people. Let me go ahead and bring it up. And I think the way we're going to do this is there are different sections of this article. This article is very lengthy. So we're going to hit each section with a point here or there and not read the entire article because it is really long. I'm just keeping it real, guys. So this article came forward. Now, this article was written by Jen Dyes. Now, for those who are not aware, Jen, she was a part of Status Quo at one point. I thought she was a co-host for Status Quo. But this is the article that really, I think, has people's heads turning. I don't know if you guys have heard this story yet, but it says exclusive 7 ex-Marianne Williamson staffers say stop supporting her. So it says, read the former staffer's letter alleging abuse, mismanagement, and concerns over the campaign direction. So here it says 7 former, actually, I'm gonna make this just a little bit bigger for you guys. 7 former staff members allege deception, sabotage, gaslighting, emotional abuse, erratic behavior, conditions leading to extreme staff turnover, and general dysfunction beyond what they have ever experienced in political campaigns or professional work. Before I dive into this, JB, I have to ask you, how do you feel about this? Do you feel like this is a smear attempt, or do you feel like there's valid points in this article?
You know, when I first saw this, one of the first things I had in mind was, I don't see stories about this regarding male candidates very often. Mm-hmm. And so there's a part of me that goes, yeah, but what about RFK Jr.? What about Donald Trump? What about Ron DeSantis? What about Vivek Ramaswamy? What about people who are running that are men that are in this race? Because the thing is that while there's probably a lot of validity to this, I don't see this too much in the camp of men. So that's the thing. But at the same time, you looking through the article, it actually talks about the history of Marianne Williamson being this way. I just wish that, not that I wish that, more male candidates were like this, but I wish that that the people who spoke out against male candidates, this was put up just as much as it would be for somebody like Marianne Williamson.
That's a good point. Let's go ahead and dive right in here. I want to start with this piece here about the goal. Our goal in making this statement is to be transparent and bring awareness to the fact that the campaign has been repeatedly sabotaged by the candidate herself. As a candidate, Marianne Williamson has consistently prevented staff from completing the work necessary to run a campaign or win an election, disregarding their experience and expertise. Despite having a staff full of competent professionals. She continually micromanages the campaign, disallowing any growth or forward momentum for the campaign as a whole. Williamson assigns tasks to staff that directly conflict with the advice of experts she hired. When staff complete the work as directed, their work is frequently picked apart and criticized by Williamson to the point that she backtracks on her own decisions and gaslights staff into believing the mix-up was their own doing. Okay. Her interactions with staff go beyond that of a tough boss, as she has claimed in her defense. Her behavior is frequently intimidating, demeaning, and demoralizing. All of us have worked demanding jobs with tough bosses. This was not the same. Working for her did not feel tough. It felt emotionally abusive and helpless. There is a difference between working for a demanding boss and feeling like you're walking on eggshells in every meeting. Okay, so I'm going to dive into, because like I said, this article is really long. I just want to comment on that really quick and get your take, JB. And then I'm going to go to the first section here, which is the shit show part. First thing I do want to say is that for those of you who have had bosses like this before, again, this is coming from the staffers, but from my own personal experience, I have had bosses before where they'll tell you to do something and then you do it, and then they'll yell at you for doing what they told you to do. And then the next thing you know, they make it seem like it's your fault for doing what they told you to do.
Yeah.
And that is not a good relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. I think ultimately this needs to be put into perspective. This isn't just a campaign story. This is a labor story. You know, you have workers that are complaining about abuses by a boss, which in and of itself should be a damning indictment of Marianne Williamson. And the thing is that some people are going to twist this and saying it's a smear campaign. And it's like, well, when workers complain about Starbucks or Amazon, is that a smear campaign against Starbucks or Amazon? If the workers are coming forward collectively to actually say something, it's not just one or two. It is a group. And I think this article was a group of 7.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is the latest one. And if you notice, you know, any of the audience reads this, if you notice that if you go down the article, is that there's a pattern here. It's not just a one-off. And so I think this is something that people need to realize if they are going to be choosing someone like Marianne Williamson as their candidate, then they need to make an informed decision based on the historical analysis of the person that's being critiqued here.
That's right. That's right. Let's go in here. This is the first section. The Marianne campaign is a fucking shit show. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy.
Woohoo!
I'm just going to try to hit certain parts that I think people probably need to hear. Many today have been turned on by her progressive Bernie Sanders style political policies, feeling frustrated at the Democratic Party they think isn't doing enough for them. But the glamour is falling off, and some think it should have long ago. A 1991 Vanity Fair article quoted internal sources saying that Marianne wants it to all be Marianne's. She is comfortable only when she controls everything, and that she wants to be powerful, recognized, and fawned over. I'm going to get back to that in just a second. A frustration for some, including in 2023, has been her insistence on injecting her brand of spirituality into everything that she does, including praying with staff for things like a boosted social media presence on Twitter and TikTok. So for this part, I do have to jump in and say, were they not aware of Marianne's like spirituality and like her faith before they decided to be a part of the campaign?
I honestly don't think they had that big of an idea, because the thing is that she was a brand before ever jumping into politics, into political life. I mean, she's been on Oprah Winfrey's show multiple times and basically giving spiritual advice to them. So,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, and I'll say too, like I knew that she was like that because she's talked about this a lot. Like she has written books about this and stuff like this too. It's like for some of the people, like if you become a backup dancer for like Beyonce for example, and Beyonce prays backstage with the dancers. You know, it's one of those things where it's like with Marianne, I felt like it was very well known because she did talk about it. Like she wrote books about it. And she was a spiritual advisor. So
Well,
it goes, oh, go ahead.
well, no, that's like going to someone's house who has crosses on their front door, and you don't expect them to want to hold hands and pray before a meal.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I think, yeah, I see what you mean. So the next section is her campaign is not a campaign. Now, JB, you know, you and I talked about this before. We're not going to dive into names here because the reason why the 7 people are not named is because of legal reasons.
Yeah.
So just FYI to the audience. But anyway, there was a post that we talked about before where it basically said that her campaign is not a campaign, it's just a book deal. It says here, the grift is the audience now that the days of lauded Oprah appearances are long gone, and she self-reports that her financial success has waned. She's just using this to be relevant to gain more followers who are going to purchase more of her books, her audio tapes, her live streams, and her in-person lectures. Politics is a tool for her to speak to people who aren't just spiritual or religious, asserts another staff member. And then it goes on to say that some are concerned by the crossover between the campaign and Williamson's business affairs, responsible for her tours, lectures, and book sales. Multiple staffers from Marianne's book tour and business end are in top campaign roles. There are people working on the Williamsons campaign that are invested in both sides, not wanting to piss her off, says a former 2024 campaign staffer. It says that Marianne had planned to release her latest book, The Mystic Jesus, The Mind of Love, in September 2023. But following public pressure, she released an announcement on July 21st that she was postponing the book for a second time, stating it might confuse the market. The book is now slated for spring 2024. So here's the thing, because you and I talked about the book thing. Here's the thing. It's not just her that has a book coming out. RFK also has a book coming out. See, and we've criticized this. We both of us like criticized like, Marianne, what's up? Why are you releasing a book in September? Why are you running for president? But RFK is also releasing a book in September. So it goes back to what you were just saying about why aren't people having that same criticism for RFK?
Yeah, that is also a valid criticism. And as far as Marianne Williamson's concerned, she knows how the Democratic Party works. This isn't her first rodeo. And so the funny part is, I know, Marianne knows exactly what they're going to do to her. This is not a movie that's never been seen. And so that being the case, if you know exactly how the Democratic Party is going to operate, I count on a snake being a snake. You count on a snake being a snake. And if I know how a snake operates, why am I going to pick it up and then let it bite me and then go, "Oh, you bit me"? And then the snake goes, "Well, you knew I was a snake when you first picked me up." And the thing is that here's the problem. The opinions shared by JB Font are not the opinions of the Sabby Sabs show. I'll put that disclaimer there. It feels like to me that she doesn't want you to know that she knows the snake is a snake. And so it's kind of like, do you really take us for fools that you honestly think that you have a chance? it feels like you don't have a chance, but this is going to increase your notoriety just so that you can have more of a lucrative book deal. And
Right.
And I'm not trying to impugn the motives, but the thing is, like, if you really want to go up against Joe Biden, you don't do it in the primary, you do it in the general. Because ultimately, if you're going to go up against Joe Biden, you're not going to go up against him in his arena. And his arena is the Democratic primary, who they choose whoever is going to move on. And you're not going to be chosen. So the best possible strategy is actually going outside of it. But at the same time, she has never hinted at a dirty break. She said, it depends on how they treat me. And the thing is like, you're not saying an affirmative. The thing is that why even bother being in the Democratic Party and run with them in the first place if you know they're going to be dirty to you anyway?
That's a good point. It says here also in reference to the book, it says Williamson directed 2024 campaign staffers who'd like copies of her spiritual books to contact her assistant to have them purchased and shipped to them, allegedly using campaign funds. Now, I don't have any receipts to back that up. So
yeah,
just with finances, again, finances, if you don't have the receipts, then I'm just like, I don't know. Someone said that another staffer emphasized, you're holding events where like 30 people show up. That is not a plan. That is not a field plan. And we've seen this when she held the event in South Carolina and Marcel Dixon confronted her about her reparations plan and told her that the amounts were wrong. We saw there wasn't many people in that room. So I have seen that too. So long story short, one of the things they're complaining about is that she doesn't really seem to have a field game, or that it's not a campaign is what they're saying.
Well, this is the biggest damning thing to me. Out of everything, it's you don't have a field plan. And when it comes, did you go into the part about ballot access yet?
Not yet.
Okay. But yeah, so the thing is that if you don't have a field plan like that, what's the point? Why are you really in the race? That's my question.
It's a good point. And there's this section that says she does not have plans. Williamson herself has publicly rejected the need for plans in campaigning and presidency. So it goes on to say that recently she appeared on Hassan Piker's show. And when she was asked about her plans to mobilize younger voters, she replied, well, I have not made an effort to mobilize young voters. I don't have any strategy like that. I did see that clip of that on Twitter. It goes on to say, former staffers have also been concerned about Williamson's lack of depth and knowledge about her own policies, which she did not personally write for the finer points of. She's never wanted to have a spontaneous conversation about healthcare or climate change, says a former team member. Another confirms she does not have plans. Some inside sources have additionally expressed unease over Williamson's inconsistent support for the LGBTQ community. Former staffers reported they wanted to participate more fully during Pride Month, but it was not made a priority. Multiple told Courage News they were alarmed when the candidates said they were no longer allowed to ask for pronouns during meetings because it makes older people uncomfortable. This was actually surprising to hear, coming from just keeping it real. This piece right here, it makes older people uncomfortable and not allowing them to use their pronouns. That's surprising to hear in reference to Marianne.
I mean, so did women wearing pants, but they still did it anyway. Yeah. Back in the day. I mean, my thing is, it's like, look, the times are changing. It's like, get used to it, But at the same time, it's just like, I don't know. Look, you're in the Democratic Party. You're in a liberal setting. Pronouns are going to be brought up. And so you might as well get used to it. And if somebody just is slightly uncomfortable with it, then they're going to have to get used to it. I mean, not everybody, for instance, it's just like being in the campaign and you have somebody who's a woman that's a Muslim that's wearing a hijab. you may be uncomfortable with it, but guess what? You're going to have to get comfortable with it because that's their culture, and that's respecting them. So, I mean, you're not going to stand up for the people who are LGBTQ, who actually want to, have their pronouns respected, and you call yourself a Democratic candidate? Like, wow, okay.
Yeah, I think, and the thing is, I think for people, whether they agree with this issue or not, I still feel like it's surprising coming from her, of all people.
Yeah.
Next section says at least 30 Marianne 2024 staffers are gone. Former Marianne Williamson campaign staff are also dismayed at the extreme turnover in their ranks, both from firings and resignations. As of the last FEC report, Williamson's wayward 2024 campaign has lost at least 30 staffers. This has been reportedly led to internal confusion due to having multiple campaign managers and contrasting directives, including Williamson. It goes on here to mention what happened during the days like in the 90s, when she worked with like the AIDS charity. So it says that she's had turbulence before with past leadership of organizations, including her LA based AIDS charity in the 90s, which experienced high turnover and multiple fired executive directors. Her tenure as the leader of Renaissance Unity Interfaith Spiritual Fellowship in Michigan faced similar controversy when an attorney local to the church saying at the time the church is in deficit and she's laid off 3/4 of the staff. So I think the point that there does seem to be a pattern.
Yeah. Gosh. And, she just, there's this deficit, of respect that it feels like. And after reading Laziness Does Not Exist by Dr. Yvonne Price, one of the things that they brought out was that when you have high turnover rates and they go into things like having a lot of tardiness and calling out things like that, it shows that the workers are experiencing a certain type of abuse by the employer or the higher ups, which cause the employees to react in a certain way. So if you're having such a high turnover rate, then of course, then that speaks to who's at the helm, who's the leadership, and what are they doing to the employees that makes them not want to stay and retain those employees. And so this really just goes to show in the character of Marianne Williamson. This to me screams when the mainstream media, especially MSNBC and CNN, kept going, oh my God, another person left the Trump cabinet. Oh my goodness, this person left, that person left. And they were trying to paint Donald Trump as somebody who was just a bad boss. Well, you can do the same thing for Joe Biden. You can do the same thing for anybody who's running the presidential campaign, because how many campaign managers has she had so far?
Right. And early on, it doesn't look good. Another piece that they mentioned here, I highlighted this: campaign staffers who previously worked on campaigns as well as other professional work say they have never seen anything like this, with some calling Williamson's behavior Trump-like. One noted, Marianne had a way of making us feel worthless. According to several former staffers, Williamson has a long-standing pattern of disregarding professional expertise, taking over the roles of professionals herself, forgetting that she assigned tasks, and then chastising staff for doing those tasks, which evidence reviewed by Courage News corroborates. Remember what I was telling you about the managers that'll tell you to do a task and then they get mad at you for doing what they told you to do?
Yeah. Have you ever had one manager tell you to do one thing and the other manager tell you to do the opposite? And so it's like, well, who's higher? Well, if nobody's hired, you just do what that manager told you. And then I go to the other manager and tell them, they told me to do this. I'm about to do this. So don't get mad at me. I'm going to do it. And then they stop me like, no, don't do it. I'll be like, oh, well, okay. Then I'll go back to the other one. I'll be like, hey, they told me not to do this. You guys need to talk amongst yourselves. So that's how I usually did it. But
right. And this point here, former staffers dispute this characterization, with one stating they felt like they were building the car while we were driving it. Several noted the campaign was an amateur operation. This is not how presidential campaigns are run. But she ran for president in 2020. This is not the first time.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just keeping it real. Like, I know they say this is amateur, but this is not the first time that she's run for president. Just like for those who are not aware, this next piece, Marianne is a traumatic person to work for. If this shit gets out in public, people aren't going to want to vote for her because she's a terrible fucking person, says a source familiar with Williamson's conduct. According to several former staffers, Williamson's campaign is marked by a do not dissent atmosphere and erratic and volatile conduct. If you told her something she didn't like, your days were numbered. Sources suggested that Williamson has a pattern of undermining, belittling, and chewing out staff while micromanaging all campaign elements. Ex-employees say, and evidence reviewed by this outlet corroborates, it was not uncommon for staff to be texted and called at all hours of the day or night, often to deal with things like a single unfavorable tweet from a low followed account on Twitter, and that they were working 7 days a week with no real breaks. So again, to me, this isn't a campaign issue. To your point, JB, this is a labor issue.
Yes. I'm going to be honest with you. Marianne Williamson really needs to pick up Laziness Does Not Exist, because I just covered that part of the chapter when it talks about, putting people way past their labor time, past their work, and micromanagement and stuff like that. That's just an abusive atmosphere. I mean, and that's what it is. And my thing is that ultimately this is just a boss that is acting honestly in a deeply capitalist way. That's what I noticed from reading this article. And the thing is that if somebody like her is willing to do this to workers, then of course, how does that person going to feel when running the country if she's actually running to win? That's the question.
Right. Considering too all the strikes that have happened in the past year and a half, what would be her response? What would have been her response when the railroad workers tried to go on strike?
My question is her campaign unionized?
I don't know.
And that, if I was running a campaign, that would be one of the first things I would say. My campaign's unionized. I encourage them to unionize. I honestly will put it like this, and this goes for any candidate whatsoever. If you have a campaign, and your campaign within the first 6 months is not unionized, I'm gonna look at you some kind of way. That goes for anybody.
It's weird, working 7 days a week. How is that allowed? I don't know if they signed a contract. I'm pretty sure they signed NDAs, which is why they can't release their names because of legal issues. But what if they signed a contract? What did the contract say? But still, working 7 days a week. It goes on to say that once she decides she doesn't like you, you're out. Multiple sources confirm that Williamson responds particularly well to fans and volunteers who shower her with praise, sometimes giving them her personal phone number or email address and trying to find roles for them on the campaign. This positive feeling of welcome is confirmed by multiple current Williamson campaign volunteers who tell this outlet they do not believe the negative reporting about the candidate. This starkly contrasts with how staff are treated. Former staff say, leaving them feeling like they are walking on eggshells. She wants to be surrounded by fans, not staffers. Eyewitnesses and those personally impacted reveal her screaming at staff and creating a hostile environment. This is not the first time we heard about this, JB.
No, and I'm gonna be honest with you, this sounds very Trumpian.
No, man, this is what they were saying. So, those reports align with the same that 2020 campaign staffers were reporting. And I talked about that, so I'm not going to go through all of that again. But this part here is important. High work demands have led to physical and mental health impacts of 2024 staff, which every former staffer Courage News spoke with confirmed, sometime through tears. Some report that the abuse got to the point where their families became concerned. Hearing her yell at them on the phone, "As hard as you're working, you need to work 10 times harder," was the ethos. Oof.
That sounds like, yeah, I want you to make bricks without straw now. That's what that sounds like to me. That's some Pharaoh against the Egyptians. I'm sorry, against the Hebrew slaves type of thing to me. It's just it's like, what are you doing? Like, and my thing is, like, if you want people to work, if you want more effort to go into it, well, then number one, are you paying your staffers a living? That's the question. That's another question. Are you paying your staffers a living wage? Number one. Number two, if you are and you need more output, then are you hiring more workers so that the workers that you currently have don't burn themselves out?
Those are all good points. There's more here about her micromanaging. One went on to say that to be president, you have to allow people to work within their expertise, and she refuses to let people do that. And then I want to get to this piece here, where it says that multiple sources and internal staff and volunteer calls reviewed by Courage News show that Williamson leans on the line that misogyny is all to blame when those who've worked with her call out how they've been treated. What does this remind you of, JB?
Oh, don't ask me that. Sabs, I know the answer to the question, but all right. Oh, jeez. Okay, this sounds like Hillary Clinton.
This reminds me of when Nick and I were interviewing Marianne, and she told Nick that he was mansplaining. That's what this reminds me of. Williamson leans on the line that misogyny is all to blame when those who've worked with her call out how they've been treated. That's what this reminds me of. When Nick tried to correct her in reference to, Israel and Palestine, and she said, "Oh, honey, don't mansplain to me." Remember that?
Yeah, I remember. And what I think is that, is misogyny a non-factor? Absolutely not. It is a factor, but it's not the factor.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's the same thing with, let's say, somebody like Dr. West. Could racism be a factor? Yes, but it won't be the factor. Same thing with Obama. Was racism a factor or the factor? And so the thing is that you have some of these people who they would attribute to being racist, and they voted for Obama twice before they voted for Trump. So it's like, how much weight does the misogyny claim really have? And this better than I do, as a woman, but just as a man from the outside looking in, as somebody that's part of a marginalized group, I don't attribute it to the entirety of why any complaints would come your way.
There you go. Next section, fear inside the campaign, literally fucking scared of Marianne. Some by Williamson's side are alleging too scared to stop working for her due to the potential personal fallout and for economic reasons, including those involved in both the political and business side of her operations, according to several sources. Multiple former staffers and those familiar brought this up unprompted, with one noting Marianne is more abusive to someone who works for her than anyone else. This person has not responded to a request for comment. One staffer emphasizes, several of us are concerned about her treatment of blank. From what we've seen, it's like this person is literally fucking scared of Marianne. A source believes some who stick by Williamson bow down to her as though she is some religious figure and take her abuse because they are literally worshiping her. Others, they think, feel stuck and worried about what will happen to them if they leave or go against her. Because let's keep it real. Even the people who came out with this information, even though their names aren't mentioned, if people who worked on that campaign connect the dots, they can probably figure out who these people are. And it could be really difficult for those people to get another job going forward. Mm-hmm. Right? Like this could be a career killer if you come forward with this information.
Yeah. That's the fear of retaliation that a lot of companies have when it comes to abuse in their rules or their code of conduct. They typically have clauses, or they typically have fail safes for just in case an employer or somebody higher up wants to retaliate. And if you have a fear of retaliation within an organization, that just looks bad upon the person who is being accused, because if they say anything, then they're proverbially their heads on the chopping block, which speaks to why all the people are anonymous in this article.
Right. Next section says Marianne's invite-only social media attack squad. Please keep this between us. She thought she was going to win the campaign by being a TikTok star, says a former staffer. A scan of social media will show many positive things people have to say about Marianne, which may partially be because the campaign has a secret official social media attack squad for volunteers. Courage News has acquired a document revealing an invite-only Marianne 2024 Debunkers team, which evidence shows Williamson requested to have, calling it an army. The document's stated mission is to counteract lies and negativity about Williamson online. Also noted in the document is to please keep this between us. Current campaign manager Carlos Cardona asked volunteers on a July 11th call to protect the queen of social media. Notice how if you criticize Marianne on Twitter, a swarm of people come in and you get attacked.
Sometimes I wonder, is it Bayhive or is it Marianne Williamson supporters?
But it's not just her. This one I will say, that's not just her. A lot of candidates have that.
Yeah, they do. My question though is do they have a DM group that is just exclusively for that for all candidates, or is it just, for instance, this one? Because I've been in DM groups where they supported Bernie Sanders, but it wasn't like, you just go debunk whoever it was. It was just, a support group. So I wonder if this is, specifically a DM group, in other campaigns as well as Marianne Williamson's. That I don't know, because I'm not in any DM groups like that. But I am curious to know if, ones like RFK, Ron DeSantis, Donald Trump, if they have any of those too.
Yeah, this issue right here, the debunking team scours social media platforms for anything negative about Marianne so they can respond in mass. We were told earlier on that our focus would be social media. One former volunteer admits. Another adds, she really only cares about her social media presence and her social image. This is not unique to Marianne. Like some of the things in this article, I just have to acknowledge, like, especially for the audience, this is not just a Marianne thing. I remember when Hillary Clinton had her swarm of people. Remember Correct the Record? She had her swarm of accounts that came after the Bernie people, like any negative comments that were made about Hillary Clinton. Like, so this thing right here, I don't know if the staffers are aware of that, but this thing about scouring social media for anything negative about Marianne. That's not unique to Marianne.
Oh, Sabs, let me tell you. I hope you don't break out in hives when I say this, but remember K-Hive.
Yep.
It came out in droves. Oh my God. Yeah, it was like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Like, goddamn.
Yeah, it goes on to say another volunteer attests volunteers were doing her dirty work on social media. Multiple sources reported that there are incentives to defend the candidate online, including the chance to win a 15-minute call with her directly if you protect her well enough. Something one former volunteer found to be particularly narcissistic. Again, this issue here does not surprise me at all. It just doesn't. Like I've seen this before with other campaigns. This section, former Marianne 2024 campaign manager Peter Dow, staff concerns should always be taken with utmost seriousness. So let me explain for people who are not aware, and I'll come back to the article. Peter Dow was the original campaign manager, and then he announced that he was stepping down from that position, but he didn't give the reason why, and that gave people on Twitter to form their own conclusions. So I do think, later on, he came back and said that he has to take care of his parents, that kind of thing, a personal thing. But I think it would have been best if that's the case, that he said that in the beginning, he's stepping down for personal reasons, things he has to take care of his own life. Didn't have to go into detail. But when you just left that out in the open like that, it made people just form their own conclusions.
Makes me wonder, like, when he said that, when he said he was stepping down without saying it was for personal reasons, then never mind. I don't want to speculate. It's just, it feels like if Peter Dow had said that initially, people wouldn't have came up with different types of conspiracy theories in their head. And then, if it almost feels like an excuse after the fact, or it's like, oh no, it's not what you guys think. It was actually because of personal reasons with my parents. And I was like, well, why didn't you just say it was for personal reasons in the first place?
Right.
I don't know. Maybe that's just my brain, but
yeah, that's right. Let's go back in here. Okay, so the Peter Dow issue, it goes on to say that Dow, who has worked as a top advisor on multiple, JB, I'm gonna mute you so I don't get echo. Multiple top advisor on multiple political campaigns, tells me I've made a commitment in 2024 election to work on expanding options for voters beyond the failing two-party system. My work with Marianne was part of that mission. In the month I was campaign manager, I restructured her team, cut costs, and positioned the campaign for long-term viability. I respect the team members I work with who put their hearts into the campaign, and I believe staff concerns should always be taken with the utmost seriousness. I hope a progressive platform like Marianne's remains available to voters. But what? Because up here it says multiple sources confirm former Marianne 2024 campaign manager Peter Dow tried to rectify these issues before leaving the campaign due to family health concerns. And one of the issues that was brought up, to your point, JB, not providing health care for her campaign team and not implementing unionization. Now, if that's true, that's a problem, because if she's one of the candidates that's running on Medicare for All, if she didn't provide health care to her employees, that's a problem.
That's absolutely one of the biggest issues. If you're not willing to do this for your workers, then are you going to be willing to do it for the American people? That's a question I think that everybody needs to ask. If you're not willing to look, do not come to me and talk about the Teamsters Union or the rail workers union, and yet your staff is not unionized. Don't tell me that you're for unions and you didn't encourage unions within your own campaign. Because if you're not going to walk the walk, then guess what? Then why are you even speaking in the first place? Because the thing is to me, it's just empty rhetoric.
Mm-hmm. It goes on to say, continuing the abuse, smearing staff when they leave. Okay. Williamson has claimed that the former staffers who complained about her campaign, how her campaign is being run, don't know what they're talking about. She has insinuated that those departing with anything negative to say had sinister intentions, were in step with the DNC, or were inept a similar tactic she used against staff who spoke out from her 2020 campaign. Allegations of former staff and volunteers being DNC plants is not just personally hurtful, it's professionally harmful, says a former staffer. What do you think about that, JB? What do you think about the accusation that the people who are complaining about the campaign were basically DNC plants?
You'll never work in this town again. Basically, it's like, oh, you know how the sausage is made, so therefore you're never going to work in this area again. Instead of actually taking some of the critique by somebody who's a former staffer and then maybe tweaking your campaign in order to be better, it's just, oh, this person, they're harmful. They shouldn't ever work at a campaign ever again, because they dare critique us, even if the critique was valid and even if the critique was done in a kind way without being disagreeable.
This piece right here, former campaign volunteers have expressed distrust and unease over how Williamson has handled staff departures. The people who are close to her within the campaign tell volunteers and supporters these people are bad. These people are evil. Former volunteers also reported they have been ostracized from online progressive groups by current volunteers after no longer supporting Williamson. The campaign really just wants to blacklist former volunteers, supporters and staff who speak out. I agree with that. I believe that because for the way that they come after people who don't want to support Marianne.
Yeah.
Like we see it.
Yeah. Yeah, because you dare speak against the queen, then they want to off with your head, so it's like blacklist. Yeah.
Delvia said Marianne is a DNC plan.
In the words of my lovely fellow white people, no shit, Sherlock. Yeah, that's what it feels like to me. It's just like, yeah, Delphia, I agree, but yeah, it's not good. It's just like Donald Trump said, it's not good. It's not good.
No, we get into another finance issue. Another source asserts urgently in relation to the smears, Marianne is siphoning off funds, time, and energy from people who would describe themselves as left-wing and no real intention of becoming president of the United States. Siphoning off funds. See, again, for me, when we talk about like the finance issues, I said the same thing in reference to the smears about Cornel West, about the tax issue. You need to show receipts.
Yeah. That may be a FEC violation in the making.
This is why it's important to have like receipts in reference to that. And then the legal issues. Marianne Williamson's legal threats and fear of the press. Marianne has long had an up and down relationship with the press. 1992 People magazine story reported demands that staff not speak to reporters. With Marianne exploding, "You're fucking with my livelihood. I'm famous. I don't need this. Damn it."
I'm sorry. Yo, this sounds like some Hollywood type shit. Like, I can see her with a martini glass and she's swishing around and spilling. She's like, "I'm famous. I don't need this, god damn it." I'm sorry.
This part here is very telling. It said in June 2023, staff call for her 2024 campaign reviewed by Courage News. Williamson warned the team against press leaks, saying, "It would certainly be my hope that none of you were talking to the press. Hopefully, you're not leaking." Williamson reportedly does not like staff calls being recorded. The candidate recently publicly posted a contradictory message on Twitter, implying she welcomes the press talking to staff, saying, "My staff is fine, wonderful, fun to work with. Ask reporters to talk to them sometime." This has proven difficult given the Williamson NDAs and legal threats, leaving some former and current staff tight-lipped. And I also want to add here too, NDAs are also not uncommon in reference to political campaigns.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But how are you going to go to your staff? Don't y'all say nothing. You better not say nothing to them. Oh, yes. I love when they talk. This, okay. Not trying to impugn anybody's motives. But when a parent is not doing the right thing by their kids, it's like, when we go into that office, you better act like you got some sense or I'm going to knock your behind out. And then next thing you know, it's like, oh, yeah, I love my children. And yes, they speak to me and they give me their feedback when it comes to me being a parent. And of course, I like for them to speak their mind. Next thing you know, they look at their kid like, I dare you to say some shit. That's what it feels like to me reading that. Am I wrong? Am I stepping
It reminds me of, you ever saw the movie The Five Heartbeats?
No, I feel, oh my God, my black card is going to be revoked right now.
No, JB. In the movie,
The Temptations movie, though. I did see that. The Five Heartbeats, no. Sorry.
Okay, well, let's use the Temptations movie. Remember in the Temptations movie, Leon, who played David Ruffin's character, said, "Y'all's mama's boys. Y'all be nothing without me. Nothing without David Ruffin." That's what it kind of reminds me of.
Ain't nobody coming to see you, Otis. I made your asses.
Yes, Danny saw Five Heartbeats. In Five Heartbeats, Big Red, the character Big Red, he beat up one of the singers, not of the Five Heartbeats, but a different group that he managed. And he said, "Now, my office hours are..." It's funny. You guys see the movie to get the joke, JB, but it's funny.
Yeah. I'll try to make sure that I get it.
Okay. Cult-like and narcissistic behavior. It feels like a literal cult. Several sources allege cult-like and narcissistic behavior from the once acclaimed New Age spiritual leader. One former volunteer put it bluntly, "It feels like a literal cult." Multiple former staff sources are concerned that the political campaign events are sometimes held in churches and that they have been required to pray based on Williamson's ideology. Multiple confirmed that you're out if you dare say a word against the leader. The fuck is this? Cult expert and author of Cults Inside Out, Rick Allen Ross, notes there are levels to cult-like behavior, but has concerns that charismatic personalities like Williamson's create systems where questioning the leader's authority results in punishment and ostracization. He further emphasizes that the godlike image constructed by the leader can exploit people to act against their own self-interest and leaves the leader free from accountability. The leader hurts people and it costs them if they leave. He noted several red flags about Williamson from our conversation. I think the key to her behavior really can't be separated from the ideology of the book she's dedicated her life to teaching, A Course in Miracles. What does it say? Oh, sorry. Says Matthew Rimsky of the Conspirituality podcast, who himself was involved in what he considers to have been a cult based on the book's teachings. He too saw cause for concern, saying, among other things, And then I think this is the last part, but I want to get your take on the cult-like behavior, JB.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. It's when you have a certain belief system and you try to force people into that belief system when it's not an organization based on that belief system, then really you're just in a sense shoving your beliefs down the throat of other people, especially when it comes to religious beliefs. And that is not right. It's just like, but at the same time, if you're going to have that, then you need to let people know that that's how it is before they even get in. It's just like, for instance, there's a hospital called Advent Health here in Orlando, Florida, and everybody knows it's an Adventist hospital. They even have a little blurb underneath says an Adventist hospital, which means a religious hospital. And so they are religious, but you know that the minute you apply for the job, a lot of people aren't realizing that she is going to apply this throughout and have it threaded throughout inside of her campaign. So because of that, then some people are caught by surprise when they have this. And then on top of it, you know, to not be able to critique the head of the organization, yeah, that is extremely cult-like behavior if that is true. And the question is are there any examples of it, you know, happening where they can critique and not get any type of and not get any type of, you know, pushback, not pushback, but
Right.
You know,
Right.
Yeah. So my thing is that is there any combating of that claim, that any receipts basically against that claim?
Right. This final piece here says former staffers don't want you to vote for Marianne Williamson. This is so weird for me because I loved and adored this woman. That's part of the problem, I think, the hero worship right there. Said one source who believes Williamson should not become president. Another said, I don't want this fucking shit show of a campaign to damage the progressive movement. She needs to stop getting paid. People need to stop wasting money on her, expresses another former staffer. Her campaign is a fraud. She's defrauding everyone who donates to her. In multiple now deleted tweets, Williamson herself has doubted her suitability for public office, saying, I wouldn't be a good mayor or a good governor either, for that matter. Those are managerial positions, and it's not my forte. A former staffer asserts she does care about people as a concept, but she would not have any idea of how to do the job as president. Goes on to say, I do not trust Marianne has the ability to lead a nation. I do not want her with the nuclear codes. They go on to add, I don't want to tell anybody to read your books. I want to erase every moment I ever talked about you online. As for Williamson, she has said the best piece of advice she's ever received is to get over yourself. Yeah, it's not about you. Marianne Williamson's campaign has not responded to a request for additional comment. JB, you know, when we think about everything that's been said, and I'll go back to the beginning for the new peeps so they can see the title. What's your takeaway? Again, exclusive 7X Marianne Williamson staffers say stop supporting her.
If you have people on the inside that are growing in mass and telling the truth about something, you at least want to give it a grain of salt. I remember when you and Nick had interviewed her, and one of Nick's questions was that people have invested hundreds of millions of dollars into the Bernie Sanders campaign, and we really made out with nothing. And what is your answer to people basically not wanting to invest all this money into a campaign that is not going to give us results? And she basically said, well, just don't vote for me. I think we should take her at her word. If someone tells you who they are, believe them. The first time, believe them. And the thing is that interview that you and Nick did was eye-opening for us to see who she was, because a lot of times people will shy away from interviews where somebody may push back or challenge them or be somewhat adversarial, because they don't want you to see behind that curtain. Remember in Wizard of Oz, do not go to that man behind the curtain. I think that's what it was. It was a behind the curtain scene. And unfortunately, articles like this are further pushing that narrative that who's
JB, I think you froze.
Is really going to be. Am I still here? Can you still hear me? Okay. I hearken back to what, and not the best example, what Michelle Obama said. She said that the presidency does, reveals who you are. And if that's the case, then if we're seeing Marianne Williamson, from their account, I'd hate to see her as commander-in-chief of the country, which honestly, I don't even think she's really vying for, because given the circumstances of the Democratic Party.
Well said. Well said. Well, JB, thank you so much for joining me for this story. Before you go again, where can people find you?
Yeah, so you guys can find me, of course, on Revolutionary Blackout Network, just like Sabby Sabs. But you guys can also find me on my channel at JB Font. You guys could just go ahead and look that up on YouTube. I'm also on Rockfin and Rumble, Twitch, and Facebook if you guys would like to, as well as you guys can find me also on Twitter at JB Font as well. And yeah, I talk about political issues, and I also push out a dad joke or two. So you never know what you'll see from me.
That's right. All right, JB, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you so much, Sabs. And it was a privilege to be here. Take care, Sabs. Bye, Eric.
Bye. All right, guys. Really interesting story there. I don't know, man. When you have 7 people come forward, it's 7 people. Like, I don't know. We're going to go to some of the comments here in just a second, and we'll go to other stories. But first and foremost, if you have not had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button, guys. I don't know what happened to there we go. Smash that like button, guys. That helps me out with the algo. Thank you very much if you have not had a chance to do so. Eric, I'll go ahead and take that comment on Rockfin, and then I'll get to the super chats on YouTube. All right. Oh, did I mention we have a poll? I'll get into that in a second. All right. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. First, I hope you guys enjoyed the virtual HH concert I invited you to. 2, JB, you tried to dodge me before, but I got you now. 3, JB, in the camp of men, great title for a book about men behaving badly. 4, the Boston Globe says Tory sentence 10 years for shooting Megan. 5, Marianne is terrible. 6, had a revelation. If the business GOP want a merit-based system, ask, does that include eliminating inherited wealth? 7, Ohio, vote no. And thank you for this as well. Afraid you won't get to work for a campaign ever again? Take those skills and put them towards real change. Run a CBI in your state, preferably as an amendment. Make the change in your state if you have that option. Maybe we can make this a thing. It's easier to get measures on the ballot than it is to get the person you're campaigning for in office. We should start reaching out to campaigners who've been DC blackballed. Ooh, that's a good one. Good one, Roger. Thank you. Johnny says this story is very unfortunate. I agree 100%. Shirley said, I love my Sabby mug. Thank you. I'm glad you got it. Gamer says 30 staffers quit and fired. That's all you need to know about Marianne. Thank you, Eric. Marianne Williamson thought she wrote Dianetics. For those who don't know, like Dianetics, that's the book, usually Scientologists reference. And thank you for the super chat, Perry. Why does Katie Halper support Marianne? I do not know. I don't know. I don't know Katie like that. So you'll have to ask her. All right, let's go ahead and give a shout out to patrons. I did not forget about you guys, and we'll dive into the next story. If you haven't had a chance to do so, please go ahead and answer that poll question that's pinned to the live chat. That'll be for our Dr. Shiva story. I think that'll be pretty interesting. When I saw the poll recently, it was the numbers were pretty close. Shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. If you are new and you want to become a Sabby patron, I have 5 categories: ultimate, sabinators, sabsters. There's also some sabbies in the house. And of course, members. All of their names are listed here. You can also see their names scrolling across the bottom of the screen there on the ticker. And I want to give a shout out to new Sabby patrons. Over here, we call them newbies. Let's give it up for John Kelly, Ms. Liz, Alejandro Luperon. Oh, that reminds me of the song. Don't call my name, don't call my name, Alejandro. And Richie in Google World. Whoop, whoop. Shout out to all the newbies and thank you so much. All righty. We're moving on to this story about Imran Khan. I talked about him a couple of months ago when the police had surrounded his house. Apparently, they believed that he had incited a violent protest. Now, he gave an interview after that, and he said that he was not the one to incite violent protests. Imran Khan, for those who are not aware, he's a former prime minister of Pakistan. He's also a former cricket player, apparently a very well-known cricket player. That's actually where he got his start. Well, believe it or not, Imran Khan is now arrested. So here we are. I think it's just about 2 months ago when I covered this, when they surrounded his house. So Imran Khan was arrested, apparently while I was on break, and they arrested him for corruption. Now, when I talked about Imran Khan last time, I told you that one of the things that he did do was he embraced populism as a leader, that he implemented some policies and ideas in Pakistan that actually helped the people. And he believed that because he created a new political party, that is the reason why he was being targeted by the military, by the police, why they were coming after him and they wanted to take him down. Before I went live tonight, it was reported that Imran Khan can now not run for political office for 5 years. So they wanted to stop him, and they did. And we're going to get into his arrest and what he is asking his supporters to do in Pakistan now. But before we do that, I think we need to go back so you can see a little bit of a background about Imran Khan, because the last time I talked about him, I did not go into his background. And I want to show you this because I think this piece is important. Imran Khan, even though he started to embrace populism and implemented some policies that helped the people, he did not come from a working class background. He actually came from a pretty privileged lifestyle, like, to be honest. He was famous. He knew famous people because of his profession as a cricketer. Is that what they call them, cricketers? Because he was a professional cricketer, but he was really good at cricket. And he hung out with celebrities. Everybody seemed to love Imran Khan until he got involved in politics and wanted to find ways to help some of the people. But who was he? Let's get into it.
Let's talk about Imran Khan, the former cricket star turned prime minister at the center of a political storm in Pakistan. He was kicked out of office last year, is now facing more than 100 legal cases, and was briefly arrested in May. It led to huge protests and violence. Khan says he's the victim of a conspiracy to force him out of politics for good.
What is happening right now is not because of me.
People in Pakistan are really divided over Imran Khan. His supporters see him as the only hope for the country.
Imran has basically become a prophet of change.
While his opponents accuse him of spreading lies and fueling a toxic style of politics.
This became a two-way fight of rhetoric of like good versus evil.
So who is Imran Khan? Why is he so divisive? And why is politics in Pakistan in such chaos right now?
One of the things I want to add too is you'll see this in one of the news clips I'm going to show you is that some of his supporters really don't believe that Pakistan can actually go forward without him. Let's continue.
First off, let's run through Imran Khan's backstory. He was born into an upper-class family in Lahore and went to an elite high school. He studied at Oxford University in England, but it was his cricketing career that made him into a superstar.
Got to pause here because of commercial. Sorry. Here we go.
A very glamorous cricketer too. That glamour, of course, brought him to the attention of high society in London.
In the early 90s, he was hanging out with rock stars and royalty and married a British aristocrat. But he was also getting into charity work and raised money to open a cancer hospital in Lahore in memory of his late mother.
Here's a cricketer, a public icon, trying to provide free cancer care in a country where this was not accessible for most people. And that then translated into a conversation he had about the role of corruption, improving governance, and then his entry into politics.
In 1996, Imran Khan launched his own political party.
Let's pause here for just a second. Who does that remind you of? Talking about corruption, wanting to help the people. And so he thought that by getting into politics, he could be the person to do that. Now, it kind of reminds me of some of the things that Bernie Sanders said back in the day, although Bernie was already a politician, right? But Imran Khan did something a little bit further. He created his own political party because obviously he realized the political parties that were present were not going to suit the issue that he had with corruption. Now, why do I bring this up? Because Imran Khan was arrested because they believed that he was corrupt, when corruption was the very thing that he was trying to fight against. Now, he does not believe that that is the reason why he was arrested. There have been other supporters that have come forward that said there have been other politicians that actually are corrupt and they're not arrested. They're still walking around. So what is it about him? Why did the police surround his house a couple of months ago? Why do they want him out of politics forever? And my belief is because he did embrace some of those social policies. We'll get into that in just a second. Let's go on.
Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, which means Movement for Justice. He styled himself as an outsider on an anti-corruption mission, but his political career didn't really take off until 2011. That's when he held 2 rallies in Lahore and Karachi. Tens of thousands of people showed up. He was promising to bring a new kind of politics to Pakistan. And 7 years later, that message helped him get elected as prime minister.
मैं ये आपके सामने ये प्लेज करता हूं कि इंशाल्लाह ये एक बिल्कुल आप मुख्तलिफ किस्म की पाकिस्तान में गवर्नेंस देखेंगे.
Now, until Khan came on the scene, Pakistani politics was dominated by 2 parties and 2 families. The Bhutto family, which is linked to the PPP, and the Sharif family linked to the PMLN. That's the party of the current Prime Minister, Shehbaz Sharif. For years, the 2 sides have been alternating in power, a pattern that Khan was determined to break.
To demolish what he called the grip of dynastic politics in Pakistan.
He's very popular among young Pakistanis who do not see the old guard as being representative of their ambitions and aspirations. He's also popular among middle and upper middle and elite classes.
Doesn't that sound familiar? Look at who he is popular among. Mainly the younger people, people who are middle class, people who kind of want that old guard style of politics to be pushed out. He started an entirely new political party, guys. I mean, we don't have politicians in this country, for the most part, that are brave enough to do that. The politicians that we have in this country that claim to fight for progressive issues, they don't want to start a new party. They don't even want you to vote for third party or independent candidates. They want you to stay within the Democratic Party, the party that you can't change.
Are of the view that Pakistan have been harmed by the politically corrupt elite for too long, and Imran is our hope.
Now, there's another layer in Pakistan's politics that you need to know about, and that's the military. Since Pakistan's independence in 1947, there have been several military coups, and generals have ruled directly for 33 years in total. But when there's been a civilian government, the military still plays a big role behind the scenes.
They have like such a strong influential meddling going on that no government in Pakistan really gets formed without their involvement.
And it seems that was also the case for Imran Khan, that the military was pretty influential in his rise to power.
This is something which is acknowledged by the military leadership of that time. People who have subsequently came out after the retirement and acknowledged and confessed that yes, we have helped Imran win.
And Khan actually sold himself as a candidate who could work with the military. They were seen as being on the same page.
The constant struggle and tension between civil and military establishments in Pakistan was something that people expected would end with Khan coming into power.
But it didn't. Here's what happened.
So here's someone who thought at some point that, yes, I can be a politician and I can actually get along with the military powers that be. I can make this work. Didn't seem to work out. Doesn't seem to work out in this country either.
So it's 2018, and Imran Khan's just been elected prime minister. It was actually a pretty contentious election, and his political opponents accused him of fraud. But Khan was popular, and for a lot of people, it felt like a fresh start. Remember, his big thing was tackling corruption, something he said was at the root of most of Pakistan's problems. So he went on a massive anti-corruption drive. Many politicians and government officials were arrested.
You would never see that here. Here's someone who was elected prime minister, and he went on to an anti-corruption drive where he arrested other politicians and government officials that were corrupt. You would never see that happen here. Never see that happen. This is one of the reasons I also believe why they don't want him in power anymore, why they don't want him to run for office. Again, at least he can't for the next 5 years if things remain the same. This is one of the reasons I believe, again, why they tried to stop him.
Khan's supporters approved, but his critics said it was one-sided and that he was only targeting his political opponents, though Khan denies that.
Order in the house, please.
Another criticism was that Khan's approach created a kind of vindictive and divisive political atmosphere.
And he made compromise a bad word. You were all in with Khan or you were anti-Khan for whatever reason. That was the conversation.
Khan brought with him an extremely divisive and some would say hateful style of politics. Much of that reflected in the language that he used, haranguing his opponents and accusing them of being thieves and crooks.
Oh, God, no. How dare you call politicians thieves and crooks?
सिर्फ हम जिससे मफामत कभी नहीं करेंगे वो लोग हैं जिन्होंने पाकिस्तान की अवाम का पैसा चोरी करके.
You see, it all goes back to money. He said, we will never reason with those politicians who looted and laundered the Pakistani people's money. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with calling that out?
Now, the economy was a big issue when Khan was prime minister. He inherited a lot of problems, including a major debt crisis, and he had to deal with COVID too. But the bottom line was that living conditions for most Pakistanis didn't improve under Khan. Inflation soared and the value of the currency fell.
As the economic stress mounted, people sort of began questioning, what this hope and change mantra was all about. And I think that began to then erode his popularity.
That sound familiar, you guys? The whole hope and change and then people's lives not really improving. Reminds me of Obama.
Overall, your democratic, your human rights, these things were being impacted. Politicians were thrown in jail, things like that. But economy was also being impacted. And along with these things, Imran's relationship with military also started fracturing.
Now, it's hard to know exactly how Khan's relationship with the military broke down because this is behind the scenes kind of stuff. But strains developed after a couple of years with Khan as prime minister. It seems the military wasn't happy about the way things were looking.
Oh, look at that. Even in other countries, the military calling the shots.
The economy was in bad shape. And on foreign policy, Khan seemed to be going his own way with a more anti-Western approach. There was a reported disagreement, too, over the intelligence chief, who was supposed to leave his job after 3 years, as per military policy, but Khan wanted him to stay.
It was kind of a straw that, if not broke the camel's back, it really made things irreparable from that time onward.
It's always been a marriage of unequals. Every time a politician or a political party has allied itself with Pakistan's military, they always get hurt by it.
By 2022, it seemed pretty clear that the military was pulling their support from Khan by standing back so the opposition parties could go after him.
And we'll stop there and we'll come out because I have 2 other clips I want to show. But that shows you that it's not just the United States. So even in Pakistan, the military, if they didn't like you and you were running for office, it was going to be difficult for you to win. So the military did like him in the beginning. And they said they were one of the ones that helped him get elected. Now, I want to dive into this current information now where he was arrested and he has been sentenced to prison. And this is coming off of, 2 months ago when the police surrounded his house and they accused him of inciting protesters to go out and commit violent acts, which he said he had nothing to do with. So he has been arrested. Let's go ahead and dive in here.
Well, Pakistan's former Prime Minister Imran Khan has been sentenced to 3 years in prison. The court handed down its ruling in his absence for illegally selling state gifts. Khan's now been arrested in the city of Lahore. Legal experts say the conviction may end Khan's chances of running in elections later this year. After his
And that has already been decided. Before I went live, they said that he cannot run for office for 5 years.
arrest, the former Prime Minister released this pre-recorded statement.
मेरे पाकिस्तानियों, जब तक ये पैगाम आप तक पहुंचेगा.
My fellow Pakistanis, by the time this message will reach you, they would have arrested me and I will be in jail. I have one request from you, an appeal, that you do not sit in your homes quietly. Whatever I am doing is not for myself. I am doing it for my Pakistanis and for you, for your children's better future.
Let's pause here for just a moment. You see what he just did? Before they came to arrest him, he released a video to the people and told them, do not sit at home and just let this continue. He goes on to say more. This is actually a longer speech. You're not going to see the full speech, but it's a longer speech. And he mentions something about them. Don't be a slave to the system. So he sent a message out to the people, letting them know, look, like, this is not about me. I'm doing this for you guys. But don't sit back and let them treat you this way. And the reason why I think that speech is incredibly important is because, again, you would never hear any of the politicians that we have in this country say this. I think the closest we may have gotten to that was with Donald Trump in reference to January. But it's not like they were coming to arrest Donald Trump. You know, this is a different thing. But you just wouldn't hear it. You wouldn't hear it. Bernie Sanders wouldn't say something like this after they cheated him. And the court ruled that the DNC was a corporation. So if they wanted to give all the super delegates away to Hillary Clinton, they could. Even Bernie Sanders didn't say to his supporters, don't sit at home and let them do you like this. You see what I mean? That's the difference. And I've noticed this with other countries. It seems like their politicians, for the most part, they seem to be more willing to fight, more willing to stand up. Here, they'll tell you they're fighting, then they just cower over and be like, okay, vote for my opponent.
If you do not stand up for your rights, you will live like slaves. Slaves have no lives of their own. Slaves are like ants on the ground.
You hear that?
Supporters of Imran Khan have been protesting against his arrest in cities in Pakistan. In Lahore, people gathered outside his home, chanting support for the former Prime Minister. They called for Khan's immediate release from prison.
Imran Khan is a national hero who is the symbol of unity. He is the leader of this nation. He wants to save the country. Today they arrested him and set an example. This is what we are doing to our national hero.
Well, Kamal Khaider is live for us in Islamabad. Imran Khan's supporters already saying that they're going to be out on the streets. A significant day in Pakistan's politics.
Indeed, a significant day in Pakistani politics. We have reports that there have been protests in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province. People are hearing the news. Of course, this does not go down well with Imran Khan's supporters. We have here with us the principal spokesperson for Imran Khan and his party, the Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf, Mr. Rauf Hassan, to tell us about the circumstances of this arrest. What do you know about this?
Well, what I've been given to understand, that it was a rough handling. He was covered with a black cloth, and there were pushes and there were shoves.
So when they arrested him, it's not like they knocked on the door and said, "You're under arrest." According to his spokesperson, they covered his head with the black cloth. They were pushing him and shoving him, kind of like something you would see in the movies, right? Like, that's what it reminded me of.
To be dishonest, requires a bit of intelligence, So even before the verdict had been announced, they had already posted a contingent of the police at his place. So they were already waited, like they knew what was going to be said in the judgment. So the moment the judgment was pronounced, they arrested him, and it was a very rough handling. Unfortunately, not only him but all the other personal staff, based at Zaman Park residence, were also taken into custody by the police.
What does this do for the party? What does this do for the upcoming elections? Obviously, Imran Khan is a popular leader, and his party has defeated the joint combined opposition. So what's the way forward? What is going to be your party's response now?
Well, long before Khan was arrested today, he had put together a mechanism to run the party in case he's arrested. And we all knew that he was going to be arrested. He most of all knew that he was going to be arrested. As a matter of fact, he was fully prepared to be arrested. So we have a mechanism in place, and we had our first meeting of the core committee today, and we have given out a call for peaceful protests right across. I shall share the statement that we have released, and you can see exactly what all is contained in that. So that core committee is now going to take decisions with consensus, and they will chalk the way out, keeping in mind the circumstances, that arise in due course of time. Thank you.
Okay, let's go ahead and pause there, and then I want to go into this next info I have here, because I do want to show you there were some of the things I told you I agreed with some of his positions, and then there were some where I was like, yeah, I don't agree with that position. Basically. So let me make sure I'm going to go ahead to that point here. I just want to make sure I'm queuing up the right part. I want to show you some of the things that he did. Not that one. Let's go to ideology. So this piece here, I think, is important. So this part here, during his government, Khan addressed a balance of payment crisis with a bailout from the IMF. He presided over a shrinking current account deficit and limited defense spending to curtail the fiscal deficit. Leading to some general economic growth, he enacted policies which increased tax collection and investment, and reforms were made to the social safety net. And I want to hover over social safety net for just a second, and I want to scroll up here. Because the ASAS program is a social safety and poverty alleviation launched by the government of Pakistan in 2019 by the party of Imran Khan. Prime Minister of Pakistan, Imran Khan called it a key initiative towards a welfare state. It is aimed at uplifting the backward class, reducing inequality and investment en masse. So you see this position right here, alleviating poverty. That was launched by his political party that he started. And this is what I was referring to when I said some of the things that he did was helping the people. And I felt like that's one of the reasons why he was a target. His government committed to renewable energy transition, launched a national reforestation initiative, and expanded protected areas and led the country through the pandemic. His government committed to a renewable energy transition, launched the ASAS program I just read to you about, and the Plant for Pakistan initiative, and expanded the protected areas of Pakistan. Then it goes on to say how he presided over the pandemic that caused economic turmoil and rising inflation in the country and threatened his political position. He enacted policies that increased tax collection and investment. His failure to revive the economy and the rising inflation rate caused him political problems. So I will say that, but I will also say that, again, I think part of the problem was the fact that, again, he helped the people, the social programs, the social safety net. And then I want to mention this part too, the foreign relations. This was the part I did not agree with, but even he realized it was wrong later on. In foreign relations, he dealt with border skirmishes against India, strengthened relations with China and Russia while relations with the United States cooled. In 2010, Khan said in an interview, "I grew up hating India because I grew up in Lahore. And there were massacres of 1947, so much bloodshed and anger. But as I started touring India, I got so much love and friendship there that all of this disappeared." So I think it was great that later on he realized that it was not good for him to hate other people. And it goes on to say that Khan views the Kashmir issue as a humanitarian issue, as opposed to a territorial dispute between two countries, India and Pakistan. He also proposed secret talks to settle the issue, as he thinks the vested interests on both sides will try to subvert them. He ruled out a military solution to the conflict and denied the possibility of a fourth war between India and Pakistan over the disputed mountainous region. This part right here, he also came back that he didn't feel good about doing this in reference to foreign policy. He publicly demanded a Pakistani apology towards the Bangladeshi people for the atrocities committed in 1971. He called the 1971 operation a blunder and likened it to today's treatments of Pashtuns in the war on terror. However, he repeatedly criticized the war crime trials in Bangladesh in favor of those convicts. In August 2012, the Pakistani Taliban issued death threats if he went ahead with his march to their tribal stronghold along the Afghan border to protest U.S. drone attacks. Because he calls himself a liberal, a term they associate with a lack of religious belief. On October 1st in 2012, prior to his plan to address the rally in South Waziristan, senior comraders of Pakistani Taliban said after a meeting headed to the Taliban leader, Masood, that they now offered Khan security assistance for the rally because Khan's opposition to drone attacks in Pakistan, reversing their previous stance. His sympathetic position towards the Pakistani Taliban and Afghan Taliban, as well as his criticism of the U.S.-led war on terror, has earned him the moniker Taliban Khan in Pakistani politics. He believes in negotiations with Taliban and pull out of the Pakistan army from the federally administered tribal areas. He is against U.S. drone strikes and plans to disengage Pakistan from the U.S.-led war on terror. And this is what I believe is another reason why he was targeted and they wanted to pull him out. Criticizing the U.S. military industrial complex, criticizing the U.S. war on terror. You have to remember those were not popular positions at that point in time. And that's another reason why I think they wanted him to go. Just something to think about. But yes, he has been arrested. He cannot run for office for 5 years at least. And his arrest is supposed to be for 3 years. We'll see what happens if his supporters try to rise up, but we'll see how it goes from there. Lana says, my dentist is Pakistani and confirms his story. There you go. There you go. The Quantum Alchemist said their parents and grandparents were just as corrupt, but at least smart enough to keep their heads on their shoulders. Interesting. Interesting. All right. Michael says one world government. There you go. There you go. Okay. Speaking of one world government, we're going to move on to our next story, which involves Khanna, and it also involves Chris Hedges. There are separate clips, but I just want to prove a point. Khanna was interviewed recently on CNN about Bidenomics, Joe Biden's economy, and how they're going to be able to turn this around and get more voters, I guess, excited about voting for Joe Biden in reference to the economy. Khanna is sitting here telling blatant lies about the economy. We're going to go through his interview first, and then I want to show you a contrast. I want to show you the interview that Chris Hedges had with Richard Wolff about the economy, and I want you to decide who you think is telling the truth about what's happening right now with the economy. Shout out to Case Study QB. I said QD. Shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. Let's go ahead and dive right in. As you can see here, it says poll, 69% of Republicans don't believe, the whole Biden thing. We skipped over that part because YouTube is funny about when you talk about the 2020 election and what Trump believes. Even though they said that you can talk about that now, I still don't trust it. So I still don't talk about it. But we're getting into this part here about the economy, and I want you to listen to what Khanna says.
Another part of this poll that is important to talk about is Joe Biden's approval rating. Overall, his approval rating is sitting at 41%. That is not great. His approval on handling the economy is even lower than his overall approval rating. Handling of the economy is sitting at 37%, Congressman. And this is where the numbers...
Let's pause here for a second. So, in reference to Joe Biden's handling of the economy, 37% approve. 37%. 63% disapprove. Now, Khanna is going to go on to tell you what he feels about the economy, as if those 63% of Americans are liars. Listen to this. And I have to admit, I was surprised to see this with CNN because, they're pro-Democrat. But although they have had some changes they're trying to be more middle of the road or whatever it's supposed to be. But I felt like she was a little bit stern with Khanna in reference to the economy. Listen to this.
Congressman. And this is where the number sits when you've got a series of good reports coming in about the economy. If that's where it sits when you're getting good news on the economy, how do you make a case that Joe Biden is doing okay?
Well, we have to talk about what the president has achieved and what he will achieve. He inherited a tough situation. He came in towards the end of COVID, and that was an economy that was hurting because of unemployment. We had to have spending to bring the unemployment rate down.
So I want to go ahead and say two things really quickly here. I don't think any of us are disputing the fact that when Joe Biden became president, the economy was not great at that point in time. I don't think any of us are disputing that. We all realize that we were going through the pandemic. We totally get all of that. Problem is, as time went on, Joe Biden's policies, his economic policies, actually made things worse. The escalation of the war between Russia and Ukraine actually made things worse economically for all of us, not just Russia, which is what they believed would happen. Okay. So there's that issue. The second issue, he brings up the unemployment. He said we had to, spend to bring the unemployment numbers down. The unemployment numbers originally went down because Joe Biden removed people from unemployment. And Ro Khanna talks about this as though this never happened. And they're all doing it. They're all doing it. Pramila Jayapal, AOC, they all have the same talking points when they come onto CNN and MSNBC in reference to the economy. None of them mention the fact that in September that year, Joe Biden removed all those people off of unemployment. So, of course, if you're removing millions of people off of unemployment, of course, the unemployment rate is going to decrease significantly. But none of them will say that. None of them will say it. And Ro Khanna leaves that out as well. So let's continue. Let's go back a little bit. Sorry.
To bring the unemployment rate down, and that hurt with inflation. So he inherited a tough situation. But what did he do? We've got construction going on around this country because of the infrastructure bill.
That doesn't put money in people's pockets. The infrastructure bill that passed, that's not changing, people's bank accounts right now. And I'm just keeping it real. If you have 2 jobs, if you're working like at Dunkin' Donuts and you're also working like as a tutor, or these common things here in Massachusetts, or you're working as like, let's say a part-time like plumber or something like that, and you're also working as like you're babysitting or something like that. I mean, though that infrastructure bill is not putting money into your pocket. He's talking about things that have been done where he is like, we helped the infrastructure in this country. And he leaves out other things that were a part of that bill that also help people like Joe Manchin continue to get his fortune increased when it comes to the coal industry and when it comes to fossil fuels. So the infrastructure bill, in reference to improving the wealth of American people, that went to Joe Manchin. His wealth improved. His pocket got fatter. Everybody else is still struggling.
Bringing home manufacturing with semiconductors. We are bringing the fundamental technology to have the industries of the future with batteries and electric vehicles. Some of that is.
What is that? How does that help working class people? The average person, if you're making, let's say you're not making the $15 minimum wage, okay? It's different here in Massachusetts. Let's say you're making that $7.25 an hour, the federal minimum wage. Can you afford to buy an electric vehicle? These are the things that Ro Khanna, when he makes these praises and he says, this is what Joe Biden has done, this is what we should be thankful for. Who is he talking about? He's not talking to the working class. He's not talking to people that are poor. Hell, he didn't really talk to the middle class. I know people in middle class can't afford to buy an electric car. Have you seen the cost of electric vehicles? He's talking to people like him. He's talking to people that are like his Silicon Valley buddies. You got to remember where Ro Khanna's district is. So essentially, he's mentioning things that approve for the professional managerial class, not working class people. Let me let him finish here.
Industries of the future with batteries and electric vehicles. Some of that is going to take time, but we're beginning to see the results. And I think as those results become more evident to the American people, and as we talk about how consequential this president has been, his numbers will improve.
You can talk about it as much as you want, but people can look at their bank account. I mean, it's just, this has been an issue for far too long. The working class didn't start struggling under Joe Biden. It was a problem before, but it's gotten worse under Joe Biden. Why do you think he has a 36% approval on the economy? On the economy. Mark my words. If Joe Biden loses in 2024, it is not going to be because of Cornel West, regardless of what like the mainstream media establishment figures will tell you. It's not going to be because of Donald Trump. It is going to be because of Joe Biden's policy positions on the economy. That is what is going to cause Joe Biden to lose. And honestly, oh well. So when you have people like Khanna making excuses for Joe Biden, that actually does not help. But Khanna is just looking out for his own political career. That's why he's saying what he's saying. If Khanna was really trying to help Joe Biden, he would come out in this interview and he would be flat out honest and say, look, working class people are still broke. People still can't pay rent. Oh, and by the way, I live in California and my state has the largest homeless population in the country. He would deliver those facts if he really wanted to put some type of pressure on Joe Biden. But they're not going to do that. People like him or Pramila Jayapal, they're not going to do that because they are political careerists. Khanna is sitting back thinking about if he's going to run in 2028. It's all about enhancing their career. They're supposed to work for us because we're their constituents. But they're not out there fighting for us. They're fighting for their careers. Let's continue.
That's the case you make. But as we're sitting in August of 23, and that's the case that has been being made for months now and talking.
Look at her facial expressions. Watch this, guys. Listen to the way she says it. Like she don't buy this shit. Watch. Watch her facial expressions.
And that's the case that has been being made for months now and talking about Biden economics. Are you okay if that approval rating on the economy is still sitting at 37% heading into 24?
Did you guys see that? So I was surprised they actually said that on CNN, but of course he doesn't think it's going to stay that way. It can go up, it can go down, etc. But the point is, Joe Biden was supposed to be the better option. Remember? Joe Biden was supposed to heal the soul of the country. I'm seeing more homeless people out on the street. You seeing little mini Skid Rows pop up around your state? More people being evicted? I thought he was supposed to be the safer option. Remember, people? Isn't that what we were told? And here we are. And people want to tell you not to vote for a third party candidate, not to vote for an independent candidate, because that could cause Joe Biden to lose. No, these numbers will be the reason why Joe Biden loses. Because the economy is so bad. It is horrible. That will cause him to lose. Not Cornel West, not Dr. Shiva, not Marianne Williamson, not RFK Jr. It will be because of his handling of the economy. Mark my words.
Well, I don't think it will be come next November. But look, people were making this argument that the president's numbers were too low before the midterm, and everyone then was surprised that the Democrats did better. People were making arguments against this president back in 2020, including me when I was co-chairing the Bernie Sanders campaign. But Joe.
What he said in reference to the midterms doesn't make any sense because those are two different things. Listen to this.
Argument that the president's numbers were too low before the midterm, and everyone then was surprised that the Democrats did better. People were making arguments against.
Let's pause there for a second. Joe Biden was not running for re-election in 2022. The candidates that Khanna is referring to, those were representatives that were running for House positions and they were running for Senate positions. So it's like you weren't voting for Joe Biden when you went to support those Democrat candidates. You were voting for those candidates. This is not the same thing. He's acting like, well, they criticized Joe Biden during the midterms, but they still showed up to vote for the Democrats. They showed up to vote for the candidates that represented their district. They didn't show up to vote for Joe Biden. These are two different things. And let's be real. You had two issues. The Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, and Joe Biden and the Democrats promised that they would codify Roe v. Wade into law. You get us those Senate seats, we'll codify Roe v. Wade into law. Right after the midterm says not happening. Promise the cancellation of student loan debt. Then right after, or a certain percentage, right after the midterm says, whoops, oopsie, federal judge struck that down. Oh, how convenient, when Joe Biden didn't follow instructions to begin with in the first place. They just use voters to keep them in office so that they can continue their political career. They don't actually plan to do these things. And Ro Khanna's no different.
This president back in 2020, including me when I was co-chairing the Bernie Sanders campaign, but Joe Biden won. So I think he's underestimated, and I believe when people go into the vote booth, they're going to know he's a decent human being, he's a patriot, he's trying his best, and he'll be reelected.
What is the whole they're a patriot thing? You know, it makes me feel kind of weird, you know, when people are like, well, he's a decent person and he's a patriot. What does that really even mean? Like, so what? What are you talking about? He's a decent person. He co-wrote the crime bills, I should add. He said he didn't want his kids to grow up in a racial jungle. He's accused of sexual assault, which people like Ro Khanna don't want to mention, AOC don't want to mention, Bernie Sanders don't want to mention. It was all believe women until the women were accusing Democrat politicians. These are things we need to think about. People just say stuff now that don't even make any damn sense just to make someone sound good. He's a decent person and he's a patriot. What the hell that got to do with what he doing in office? What does that have to do with the economy? What does that have to do with all the promises that he made when he was running that he reneged on?
Real quick, CNN cameras exclusively caught up with President Biden on a bike ride this morning, asked him if he was going to be monitoring this arraignment today, and he, in passing, as he was passing by, he said no. But I'm curious how much you think you'd like to hear Joe Biden, when he's hitting the campaign trail, talking about this indictment against Donald Trump when he is campaigning and also still president, of course.
I don't think he should be. I think he should be focused on how he's going to continue to lower the price of eggs and milk. That's what I heard back in my district, how he's going to lower the cost of childcare, how he's going to continue to bring manufacturing back, and how he's going to try to heal this country. You know, one thing I think
Let me pause there for just a second. You want to know the real reason why he doesn't want Joe Biden to speak about the possibility of him running against Trump again or criticizing Donald Trump? Because they don't want Joe Biden to really speak much, period. They don't want Joe Biden to speak much because Joe Biden's having difficulty talking. The less he can speak, the better for them. Hide him for as much as you can, for as long as possible, because they know he's having difficulty with this. That's why they don't want to let him even debate. That's why he doesn't want to debate RFK Jr. or Marianne Williamson. Don't be surprised if it comes down to the general and you don't see debates for those either. And if that happens, if you think people were angry 2 years ago, think about how people will feel if that happens. But Ro Khanna has to defend him because Ro Khanna also wants to be president.
childcare, how he's going to continue to bring manufacturing back, and how he's going to try to heal this country. You know, one thing I think the president probably regrets is that he really wants to unify this country. He wants to bring people together. That's what his inaugural was about. That's who he is as a person. And I think he knows that if he starts commenting on these things, that aspiration becomes harder. It's the hardest thing to do in American politics. I hope he'll continue to try to do it. I think that's what motivates him to run and to seek a second term.
Congressman Ro Khanna, thank you for coming on.
It's interesting. They continue to have these conversations with other politicians, but you don't see them having these conversations with Joe Biden. And again, it's because they don't want Joe Biden to speak because he's doing so horribly. Now, think about what you just heard about the economy from Ro Khanna. And now I want you to hear about the economy from Chris Hedges. And I'll let you decide who you think is telling the truth. This goes back to the Richard Wolff interview, today's class struggles with Chris Hedges. Listen to this.
Well, not only is it real, but let's say roughly 60% of American families are living paycheck to paycheck. They don't have $400 or $1,000. I don't remember the exact figure. I'm sure you do. For
pause right there. Already in. Pause. The fact that the average family is living paycheck to paycheck. It's just, and no, this is not a new issue. But the problem is it has increased. It is worse now. Ro Khanna doesn't say these things. He's asked about the economy. He doesn't even mention this. Let him continue.
An emergency. They are trapped in the instability of the gig economy. So there's not job protection. Even
the gig economy, the instability with the gig economy and no job protection. Now, why is that important in reference to Ro Khanna? Where does Ro Khanna live, right? Ro Khanna's in that Silicon Valley area, right? There's a lot of gig jobs there in the tech industry. How many people are working like in Silicon Valley, in San Jose, and that entire area that are part of that gig economy, which a lot of that came from the tech industry. And that has also increased, particularly after the pandemic. You see more companies now, like they don't really want to hire people permanently. You're not a permanent employee. They just want to hire you as a contract worker for 3 months. And then 3 months later, you get some other gig somewhere else. And then another gig and another gig. These positions, a lot of times, there's no health insurance that's offered to you. Don't even think about dental. Why doesn't Ro Khanna mention that? This idea of the gig economy, it comes heavily from his area. You got to go to Richard Wolff so that you can hear it from him and Chris Hedges. Let's continue.
Even if they have some kind of health insurance, it's the mercenary for-profit form of health insurance, which really doesn't cover catastrophic illnesses. And of course, if you get a catastrophic illness, you can't afford to pay your premiums, which means you lose it. That's why over 1 million people a year go bankrupt, even though they have insurance. So there is a deep distress rippling through the American population, and it's been rendered invisible by a corporate media that doesn't report it. I mean, look closely at the model, what the model for what goes as journalism now on CNN, MSNBC, any of these networks. It's just chatting about a few main headlines, and the shows will talk at exactly at the same kind of list of items will leap from show to show. Almost no reporting at all, and certainly no reporting of those that their advertisers and the corporate executives know will essentially create images or give voice to those the corporate state doesn't want to hold up. So,
and that's exactly why it's not common for you to watch networks like CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and see images of the working class. That's not common. And even when they do talk about working class issues, they'll interview some expert who's not working class, doesn't know anyone that's working class, and they'll ask them, well, why are these workers on strike? Instead of talking to the workers. They're not interviewing the people who have been evicted from their homes. They're not interviewing the people who have all been laid off since the pandemic. They're talking to an expert who's had no experience in any of this. That's on purpose. They're advertisers, they're sponsors. They don't want you to constantly see those images about the working class, about people being homeless, people struggling to make it and to pay, to reach ends meet. If you saw that every day that you turned on, you would probably become very upset. And that would make you very angry at the corporate powers that be. And they can't have that on their hands. They would rather have you focus on red team, blue team, so that you can stay divided among your neighbors, fighting over an elephant and a donkey over a politician that you'll probably never, ever get to meet anyway. That is why you don't see those images oftentimes on CNN or MSNBC. Look at how they talked about the protest in France. Can't believe these people are protesting over a pension reform. I mean, gosh, all Macron did was just give them an extra 2 years in reference to their retirement. They protect the corporate class.
You've rendered invisible over half the population. You don't do any reporting anymore. It's completely partisan. The media has been siloed. One side, Fox News, of course, is cheerleading the Republican Party. On the other, CNN and MSNBC, and their credibility, I think it's even lower than Congress. So the media system in the United States, which has been seized by corporate power, and that's part of what the deregulation of the FCC under Bill Clinton achieved, is farce. It's burlesque. And I'm old enough to have started as a journalist in the 1980s in Central America and watched the very steep deterioration that's taken place with all of its flaws. I mean, I don't want to pretend those flaws weren't there, but the deterioration is so marked as to be really, I think it's fair to say, certainly on the airwaves, they don't do journalism anymore, at least the commercial outlets. And then you have these alternative nonprofit, Your Show and others that attempt to address serious issues but are marginalized. This is what the Twitter files expose, that they the Homeland Security, the FBI, the State Department, the Pentagon were having weekly meetings with these social media platforms, as Matt Taibbi exposed when Elon Musk let him into the Twitter accounts. The back and forth, and all this stuff has disappeared. Critics from the left, critics from the right. And then I just one final point, and that is that when we talk about the Democratic Party, it is really now composed of the old establishment Republican Party. Liz Cheney, Crystal, all these figures have essentially been incorporated into the Democratic Party, and what they are opposing is Trump's white man's party. And I don't want to minimize the danger that a new Trump administration would visit, but both the media landscape and the political landscape is collapsed. You know more about Weimar than I do,
and they're both connected. So I want people to think about something for a second in reference to, what you're really getting in return. When they suppress these other outlets, the other independent media outlets, that's on purpose because they don't want you to hear an alternative point of view. They don't want you to hear another voice. Why do you guys think labor stories are usually heavily suppressed on these platforms? Think about it. All these strikes that have happened over the past 2 years, I've watched channels cover these strikes. Indie News Network covers strikes at least once a week. They cover labor. I've covered labor stories. And I'm here to tell you, if you're talking about labor, those stories are heavily suppressed on YouTube. Heavily suppressed. They don't really want you to focus on it. And in the end, it seems like a lot of times when they do talk about it on mainstream media, they find some way to poke the employees. Aren't you guys getting paid enough? You need more vacation time? But this is the way it's always been. I watched them do this through multiple strikes. The John Deere strike, the teachers strike. I mean, what teacher strike have they not done it to? There's been multiple ones. When the nurses in Worcester, Massachusetts went on strike, I watched it when they do it with the railroad workers tried to go on strike. I watched the way that they talk down about the railroad workers and they talk down to the people as if they're not even people. Because the people who are shareholders of those networks, they don't really want the American people to wake up to a class consciousness, because then when you do wake up, you're not going to be mad at an elephant or a donkey. You're going to be mad at the billionaire. You're going to be mad at people that own companies like BlackRock. You're going to be mad at Larry Fink. And for some of you who decided that Elon Musk was this cool person, you're going to be mad at him too when you see where his wealth came from. They don't want you to pay attention to that. He goes on a little bit more here. I actually wanted to go to the next question. This question right here. Here we go.
Understand the basis for the fact that literally for 30 to 40 years, the gap between rich and poor in this country has widened to a point that people back in the 50s and 60s really thought, and a large majority of them, could never happen again. Now it has happened. Why is it acceptable to the extent that it is? To some men,
it's not acceptable.
Good.
It's just that the working class has been disempowered.
That's right. Bingo. It's not acceptable. They've taken so much power away from the working class. Now, we have strength in numbers, but the problem is getting all those numbers on board. It's difficult to increase the numbers when people don't even want to talk to you or organize with you or unionize with you because of who you voted for. Hello. It's difficult to increase the number of people out in the streets for these protests when people don't even want to march with you because of who you voted for. This is why, like, the number of times I've covered these protests abroad, UK, France, Sri Lanka even, where they have millions of people out in the streets. They are bonded over a class consciousness that brings all of them out. We are not at that point in this country yet. And I say yet because I do believe that day is coming. We are bonded over red team, blue team, or we're bonded over social issues. And this is not to say you should not get into the streets over social issues and protests. But this is to say, where is that same type of momentum when it comes to the class issues, when it comes to you losing your job, where all these workers get laid off, them taking people off of unemployment, Joe Biden removing Medicaid from people, taking your health insurance away, taking your homes. You see, Occupy Wall Street actually had the right idea. They had the right idea because they realized, wait a minute, the top 1% is screwing all of us over. So the idea was correct. The problem is that message was then taken and it was funneled into a Bernie Sanders campaign into the Democratic Party. And that just took the momentum and the action that was on the street and it put it into a political party. That's a graveyard. You can't do that. Could you imagine? Imagine if Dr. King said, all right, guys, I know we're out here protesting and we've been working really hard, but there's this guy that's running for president and he's going to take this message and he's going to make it a part of his platform. And then the people, the activists on the outside just stop. No. They knew this would not work. Dr. King knew you can't do it through the political parties. Malcolm X knew that was not the way to go. Fred Hampton knew. Hell to the no. Those people are going to take your message. They'll co-opt it. They'll water it down. And you won't win within the community. That's where Occupy went wrong. Letting Bernie Sanders take that message and put it through a political campaign in the Democratic Party. Let me let Chris finish here.
So in the 50s, certainly in the early 50s, you had 34% plus of workers were organized into labor unions. And so there has been such a concerted, starting with the 1947 Taft-Hartley Act, but such a concerted effort to break the back of unions, to destroy unions. Now we have about 11%, and I think about 6%. You can correct me if I'm wrong, and these figures are public sector. And we saw with the railroad, the freight workers, they don't have the ability to strike. That was taken from them by Biden and the Congress under the
Railroad Workers Act. Now remember, notice, did Khanna mention any of these things? Did Khanna, we're talking about the economy, Khanna mention anything about all the labor strikes that have happened in the past 2 years since Joe Biden has been president? Didn't even mention the railroad workers, what they went through. None of the stuff that you're hearing Chris Hedges discuss. There has been efforts over the past couple of decades to kill unionization. And this is why I tell you, unions is a great starting point, but your end game should be worker co-ops. And this is the reason why. Look how they try to crush it. Or the union management goes against what the members want. How many times have we seen this happen? You know, it's just, you can't. You got it. They're going to try every way that they can to crush you, right? When I interviewed the gentleman from New York, the Postal Workers Union, he said back in the 70s, they did wildcat strikes all the time. And I said, well, why doesn't this happen now? And he's like, people just don't feel empowered. It's harder for them to go on strike now. You know, you can't, the longer you wait, the harder it's going to become, because they'll just continue to implement laws and rules to make it more difficult for you to maintain any type of little power that you have as a worker. What happens if the Supreme Court makes a rule that you can't go on strike? What happens? And don't tell me it can't happen. It can happen. Well, what do you do? This is why I say those who are going on strike, you need to ask for everything that you can now.
Railroad Act. And you had the Democratic Party under Biden when they were running, positioning themselves as a kind of pro-labor party, and they would strengthen collective bargaining. And then when threatened with a strike, they took away the ability to collectively bargain among one of the few organized unions that had it. So people are angry, and it is being expressed in very dark ways, especially by the white working class, but they're not organized. And it is the destruction of unions that I think is at the core of both our political and economic malaise. And so you have an enraged population that has no ability to pit power against power, because the only ability that the workers have to pit power against power is the strike. And that is, in essence, been taken from them. I mean, strikes, they're in all, are virtually illegal in the United States.
There's one more part here. And then I do just want to say something really quickly. This is why Shama Sawant was brave enough to step down from her political position, which she did not have to do, was brave enough to do that, step down from that and say, we need to build a working class coalition across this country. And that's why she started Workers Strike Back, because she's like, no, there needs to be some type of organization that can bring all of these unions together under one umbrella and really fight for some real concessions here. Let him finish here about, do you see some hope?
In the militancy, at least in a few areas Amazon, Starbucks. Do you see something shifting in the working class, in a sense, in response to what you've just said?
Well, certainly the aspirations are there. But remember, organizations, corporations like Amazon, Starbucks, Walmart's are really vicious in terms of breaking any kind of nascent unionized movement or union drive. And even when you establish a union, as they did in Long Island with Amazon, there's heavy pressure to destroy it. So yes, the aspirations are there, and that is where the hope is. That's why Shama Sawant is not running for re-election on the city council in Seattle, but trying to build nationally a worker strike back movement. Because of course, the other problem is that the union leadership of the unions that exist, the old AFL-CIO, et cetera, have really been bought off with lavish salaries. They're just kind of junior partners in the capitalist system. So many of these strikes really have to become wildcat strikes, where they defy the union leadership. I think it was 2018, the West Virginia teachers strike, where the union leadership didn't want to strike and the teachers struck on their own. But we're almost beginning from zero. And so, yes, there's certainly hope, but we can't be naive about all of the forces, both governmental, but also corporate, that will attempt to break the back of this movement. And we are a product of probably the bloodiest labor wars in the industrialized world. Hundreds of American workers were killed. Tens of thousands were blacklisted. And these people will play dirty, and they'll play hard to break the back, because they have essentially succeeded in domesticating the working class, and they want to keep it that way, especially with the gig economy. Even I just was part of the strike at Rutgers, because I teach as an adjunct in the prison system. There you have people with PhDs earning $28,000 a year without benefits. And they can't even afford rent. I mean, some of them are sleeping on couches or friends. And the highest paid state official in New Jersey is the Rutgers football coach at $4 million a year. I mean, just insane. So you have a corporate kind of model. I mean, even professors now have been plunged into the temp or gig economy with no benefits and no job security. So we have a steep hill to climb. But yes, I find hope in that there is an understanding among the working class that this is the only way out, both economically and politically.
All right. So you see a very stark contrast there between what Ro Khanna's response was about the economy and what Chris Hedges' response was about the economy. Right? How can you talk about the economy and not even have some type of mention about labor, about the people all these different people on strike? How can you not even bring that up, Ro Khanna? As if Americans are deaf and blind. I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. It's a hot mess, man. It is a hot mess. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Too much talk about economy, not enough talk about income inequality. Even when economy is good, income inequality persists. Reason, if we measure work and economy by purchasing power, giving the illusion that people got money when in fact they don't have borrowed money, aka credit cards, because paychecks are underwater, division within the Labor Department to measure income inequality is needed to make part of the convo. Interesting points there, Roger, as well. Let me go to the super chats and we're going to get to our Dr. Shiva story, which I think is really interesting. Thank you so much for the super sticker, Aberdeen71. Get to the gone. Okay. Hedges made me look at things completely different. His writing and input is second to none. I hear you. Ravina says, I was on track to retire at 65. Then in 2008 happened. I lost 100% of my 401k that I've been paying into for 20 years at that point. I know people that had to dip into their 401k to pay their rent. Delthea says, NPR has a show called Marketplace, Not Labor Place. Think about it. It's a good point. And JB says people are also exhausted by imagination because they're overworked and suppressed from a time perspective. Many don't have the bandwidth to even look deeper into class issues. That's a good point. They keep you working so you don't have time to organize. Speaking of organizing, Dr. Shiva is running for president. I found out about this literally the other day. Dr. Shiva, for those who are not aware, he taught at MIT. He was a professor at MIT. He also was a student at MIT before he was a professor there. He's also known for inventing email. Yes, email, although there's some controversy around that. We'll get into that in just a second. And I remember Dr. Shiva actually ran against Elizabeth Warren when Elizabeth Warren was running for re-election for U.S. Senate. So he ran against her, and there was a big to-do during the debates because there were protesters there during Elizabeth Warren's debate with Jeff Deal. Jeff Deal's like a Trumper dude. He's run for multiple positions. He keeps losing. I don't know what his deal is. Anywho, they would not let Dr. Shiva debate. And this was a big deal. And, you know, like obviously supporters of Dr. Shiva were not happy about this. So they did protest during the debate. You could hear them if you were watching it on television saying, let Shiva debate, let Shiva debate. So it's a big deal. He is a very controversial figure to some because some of his beliefs and views are not on par with what the establishment would like. But I don't have to continue to explain to you who he is. I want to show you his campaign video for president, and then I'm going to get into this interview that he had with Kim Iversen. There's a couple of issues that they discussed that I think we really need to focus on. And I will say this, Dr. Shiva has kind of been known for revealing information before other people did, and they got credit for it. And you're going to see that in this campaign video for president. So here we go.
Who would have ever thought I'd be running for president of the United States of America? I was born a low-caste untouchable in India's caste system, a system of aristocracy, oppression, and racism. My name is Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai. I'm an MIT PhD, a Fulbright scholar, a scientist, engineer, entrepreneur, and inventor. My family and I left India to come to America on my 7th birthday. I grew up in the working-class neighborhoods of New Jersey, playing baseball, mowing lawns, painting houses, and coding software. My friends and neighbors are blacks, Italians, Irish, people of all races. As a 14-year-old, I wrote 50,000 lines of software code to create the world's first email system, and was awarded the first U.S. copyright for email, recognizing me as its official inventor at a time when copyright was the only way to protect software inventions. I did that long before I ever came to MIT, revealing that big innovations can occur anytime, any place, by anybody. Growing up, I saw politicians dividing us by race and religion in both America and India, to have us fighting each other while they remained safe in their gated communities and in their playgrounds of Hollywood, Martha's Vineyard, and Silicon Valley. I'm a fighter. I fought racism and exposed their imperialist wars, fought for workers, and put my life on the line against global corruption. I never wanted to run for political office. All that changed when I saw working Americans as never before being duped by the establishment and the not-so-obvious establishment. Across left and right, we were being sold out and made to forget.
Did you guys notice that Vosh was there? Look, hold on. Look, watch. I saw you, Wary. What'd you say, Wary? Wary said, come on, man, you didn't invent email. Actually, he explains that pretty well. Let me finish. Hold on.
Never before being duped by the establishment and the not-so-obvious establishment across left.
This cracked me up because he showed TYT. Look, guys, the not-so-obvious establishment. This is important. He showed AOC. Look, he shows all of them. AOC, Dave Rubin, Vosh. I'll go back and let it play. Sorry. I thought it was funny.
Before being duped by the establishment and the not-so-obvious establishment across left and right, we were being sold out and made to forget why we came to America and why America existed. Lawyers, academics, billionaires, celebrities, and politicians, elites, Clintons, Kennedys, Bidens, Obamas, Bushes, black and white have hijacked America. They printed trillions for their friends. They delivered crumbling infrastructure, corruption, and racism. They've transferred trillions to themselves, dividing black and white, fear-mongering, and fake science. Lockdowns and censorship, dirty air, food, and water, pushing drugs upon us, making us sicker. We've been sold out. One set of rules for them and another for us. We deserve a warrior with a history of courage in putting everything on the line for you, who believes in you, not them, who has created a movement bottoms up for truth, freedom, health. I've exposed their lies at the right time, never waiting until it was popular. I've exposed their false gods.
We got to pause here for a second because he points out RFK, and why is that important? It was brought to my attention, again, this is all coming my way like as of yesterday. It was brought to my attention yesterday that some of the talking points that RFK Jr. has, he actually got from Dr. Shiva. That includes not just the issues with the censorship, but also his issues in reference to the jab, that he got that from Dr. Shiva. Let me let it play. He called him a false god.
Never waiting until it was popular. I've exposed their false gods who exist to lead you back to them. I've exposed their fake science of lockdowns and masking and provided you solutions to fight them and win and protect your immune system, saving millions. I exposed Fauci, galvanized the Fire Fauci campaign when others remained silent. When they stole our election, we sued the government and Twitter in our historic 2020 federal lawsuit, exposing in bare view the government and big tech censorship infrastructure, the unholy alliance between government and social media companies. Where was Elon and his grifters? They stood by the sidelines and did nothing. They did not.
We're going to get into this too. This is another point in the interview that we're going to talk about where Dr. Shiva basically explains that he called out the government tapping into social media, and especially Twitter was one of the big ones, where they were actually telling Twitter executives what to do and who to censor and who to suppress. And he knew because it happened to him. Remember, this is someone that writes code. Like, they can figure these things out. So he claims that he called that out earlier on. And not only did he call it out, but he reached out to Elon Musk about it. He reached out to Donald Trump about some of these things, like early on, and nothing was done. And then Elon Musk decides to do the Twitter files, and now he's praised like this big hero. So we'll get into all of that in the interview. But this is a call out video if I've never seen one. I got to tell you that one.
And Twitter in our historic 2020 federal lawsuit, exposing in bare view the government and big tech censorship infrastructure, the unholy alliance between government and social media companies. Where was Elon and his grifters? They stood by the sidelines and did nothing. They did not use their megaphones to help us when it could have made a big difference. Now our movement grows for truth, freedom, health, independent of all of them. Every day, millions are learning the science of systems, the knowledge the elites do not want you to have, so you may learn how to think, stand up, and fight, independent of the establishment of left and right and their fake heroes. Now it's time for you to join the movement, to win back America, to win back truth, win back freedom, win back your health. That's why I'm running for President of the United States. This race is about you. This race is about truth, freedom, health versus power, profit, control. We've had enough. They think we'll fall in line and vote again for their lawyers, celebrities, billionaires, and chosen ones from above. We choose our heroes from below, from the rank and file, who do what is right at the right time, not when it's convenient and popular. They can never represent us. What America needs is a movement by the working people, for the working people, who are educated, organized, decentralized, and fight for independence from their systems of control. And that movement exists. It's ready for you. We don't need them. We need us to go bottoms up, neighbor to neighbor. My journey, your journey are all the same. It's our time. It's time we had one of us. It's time to win back truth, freedom, health, to win back America. Be part of this historic movement, all the way to our victory on November 5th, 2024. If you're an American citizen, pledge your vote now for Dr. Shiva, the independent candidate for U.S. President. No matter where you live, you can be a part of this. Volunteer as little as 20 minutes a day. Don't delay. This is Dr. Shiva, and I approve this message, paid for by Dr. Shiva for President.
So that is his campaign video. He is running as an independent. We're going to get into this interview that he had with Kim Iversen, Kiski says, please bring Shiva on for an interview. You know, he's local to me, so I could try to see. I can invite him on for an interview, but actually, since he's local to me, I could try to see if he could do an in-person interview. Can't promise that, though. People are very busy. But here we go. Let's dive into this interview he had with Kim Iversen. The very first issue that I do want to focus on is where he was born. Because this is one of the questions I had, like running for Congress is one thing, running for Senate is one thing. But when I found out that he was running for president, I wondered, how can that be? Because Dr. Shiva was born in India. He wasn't born in the US. Just like I constantly continue to tell people when they say, why won't Shama run for president or something like that? And I say, I think Shama was born in India. So this is interesting. You tell me, guys, what you think about this. Let me know what you think about this. He says, I guess there's some loopholes here, but of course, Kim coming straight out the gate. First question that she asked him, I don't blame her. I would ask the same thing. I think we all want to know, how's this going to happen? All right. And am I on full screen? Did I do full screen? There we go. Uh-oh. There's no.
And
that's me.
You know, my reluctance about all of this because of you were not born in the United States. You're not a naturalized citizen. And
I'm
so
a naturalized citizen.
Oh, you are.
I'm a naturalized
Sorry. Yes,
yeah.
You're not. But you weren't born in the United States, and that means that according to the laws that we have in this country, there's certain parameters on who can and cannot run for president. And if you were not born in the United States, now that could be debated on whether or not that should be the case. But it is the case at this point, and you cannot run for president, or you cannot be president if you were not born in the country, and yet you're running for president. And so I want to ask you about that and what you're doing with the campaign donations then that you're collecting on this campaign that ultimately, if you were to win, you couldn't actually take office.
That is a very good question by Kim. Get that question right out of the gate, because that was the very first question that I had. Elvin Brown says the 15th Amendment changes the natural born citizens rule. He's going to get into the amendment issue. I still don't know about this, you guys. Like, I don't know if this can happen. I'm just being honest with you. So you guys know how I am. I'm not here to tell you to donate to people, to donate to politicians, but let him explain. Maybe this is something that I just was not aware of, but from what I understood, if you weren't born here, you cannot run for president, or you cannot be president.
Yeah, let's talk about that, Kim. So first of all, that's false. So let's go through that. First of all, it's a very important discussion that needs to be had. You know, most of everything I've done, it's always been to educate people, and we'll talk more about that. But Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5 of the Articles, right, which was done in 1787. There's a couple of things people need to understand in history class. First of all, the Constitution is a living document. Amendments change previous things. So if you follow Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5, which is the qualifications of president, by the way, it refers to he. Okay, according to, if you follow that by the letter of the law, a woman cannot be president, but we know the 19th Amendment was passed. But Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5 talks about the qualifications of president. You have to be 35 years old, right? You have to be natural born, which the founders, interestingly enough, never defined. And then the next thing it talks about is you have to be a resident in the United States at a certain time. Interesting enough, the Maryland legislature made Marquis de Lafayette, who was never born in the United States, and all of his heirs a natural born citizen. You can go do your research on that. Now, you go to the fact that the Bill of Rights came. So the First Amendment, you know, all those important rights came. And then we had the 14th Amendment, which was probably one of the most fundamental amendments that was passed, as important, you could argue, as the Bill of Rights, which is the Equal Protection Clause. So when you go to the Equal Protection Clause, it clearly says a naturalized citizen cannot be distinguished from a natural born citizen. You cannot have two levels of citizenry. So since that passing over 100 years ago, there have been many, many court rulings where people brought up the fact how a naturalized citizen was being discriminated as a natural born. And the courts have overwhelmingly, consistently said that you cannot do this. It's a violation of the 14th Amendment. Now, what's occurred is that if you look at the history of this law, the FEC in 2011, a guy called Hassan, wanted to get on the ballot in New Hampshire. Now, this looks like he was trying to do a money-making venture when you actually look at it, not about really running for office. So he wanted to get presidential matching funds. The New Hampshire Secretary of State said, I can't put you on the ballot because you're not natural born. And again, the secretaries of state need to be educated. But the FEC, which is the governing body, really the agency on this, interesting enough, ruled after that naturalized citizens can run for president, in fact, can collect donations. Okay, but they left out the presidential matching funds. So in court rulings, there's a very, very important principle called agency deference. Huge body of law that have been done on that. And agency deference says that a court, even a Supreme Court justice, must defer to the agency to being the subject matter expertise, the SME on it. So FEC is their subject matter expertise. So by the law, A, I can run, and B, I can collect donations. Now, we have filed what's called a declaratory relief with Merrick Garland. We've sued Merrick Garland and Gary Thompson on 2 counts. First of all, is that by the law, not only can I run, but also be president. And this is an educational process that needs to be taking place. And so the declaratory relief, which we filed in DC about a month ago, tells the courts to order, no different than Brown versus Board of Education, that we want Merrick Garland to order, or the courts to order Merrick Garland to inform all the states, right? Because we live in a republic. Each state can decide ultimately the requirements for ballot access. In Massachusetts, for example, you have to collect 10,000 signatures. In Vermont, you have to collect 1,000 signatures. And when you collect those signatures, and they may have other requirements, right? You may have to have electors and you may have to have X number of meetings. So we want Merrick Garland, or the courts to order Merrick Garland to tell all the Secretary of States when our volunteers, and we have about a couple 100,000 already all over the United States, when they collect signatures and they submit, preemptively, if they do that, that's a violation of the Constitution. So that's what we've done.
So let me just pause there for just a second. I think that he made some really interesting points there. This is my first time my second time watching this interview, but this is my first time actually hearing someone make that point, that technically, if you look at the actual language that's in the Constitution and the different articles, technically it doesn't say, according to him and in legal terms, it doesn't say that someone like him can't run for president. So this is really interesting. We're going to go on to like Kim has like a point to make here that I think is important, but this is really interesting. And I'd like to look into this a little bit further, but I also try to see if I can interview him to see, how many people are aware of this. So let's let Kim continue here.
So there's going to be a lot of people who are going to push back on this idea. If it is the case that a naturalized citizen and not natural born could actually hold office. Now, I agree, you could run for office, you could collect donations, but that's different than actually then being allowed to take office once you win, if you were to win.
Right.
And there would be a lot of pushback on this because we all lived through the birthergate, the Obama birth certificate saga, where it was, where was he really born?
Yeah.
Oh, he was born in Kenya.
Yep.
And so he could not be president. I mean, there was millions upon millions of people who believed that Barack Obama was not born in the United States and therefore could not actually be eligible to hold office. So what would you say to all of the people who fought that,
Well,
even Donald Trump himself, for all those years?
Yeah, look, first of all, a lot of these people probably are smoking weed and didn't really study the Constitution. Just because someone on the right or the left says that the sun rises on the east doesn't mean they're wrong. Okay, so let's take the sort of general philosophical perspective. First of all, I haven't investigated, I haven't looked at Obama's birth certificate or not, so I haven't had the chance to do that investigation. But I can tell you that Obama, if he was indeed born somewhere else, he should have taken this head on, because the 14th Amendment makes it absolutely unconstitutional to deny me the right to be president. Now, Paul Clark is one of the leading legal scholars in the country on this, and Paul has written a wonderful legal review on this. And the 3 points that we've argued in our court suit is, first of all, the First Amendment says any political speech is the most protected form of speech. So my running for office, I should be able to run. Number 2, the 14th Amendment, was really established for the states. But Bowling versus Green extended that back at the federal level to the 5th Amendment, which is due process. So the law is there. And then another very important principle is called let the political process decide.
Let me pause here for just a second because someone just made an excellent point. Der Quantum Alchemist. So yes, technically, even a foreigner can become U.S. president provided he lived at least 12 years in the U.S. and, of course, is loyal to the U.S. So yes, technically, even a naturalized citizen can become U.S. president provided he lived at least 12 years in the U.S. and, of course, is loyal to. Okay, so I'll have to look into this. Like, I'll have to, you guys know how I am. I can't just take someone's word. Like, I'll have to look into this a little bit more because, again, I've never heard this, and it could just be that I never heard it. But I'll definitely have to look into it. Mad Crab Sabs, I have his contact. I'll DM you, Mad Crab. Thank you. Shout out to Mad Crab in the house. I'll let him continue a little bit more on here, and then we're going to go to the next clip.
And this is something even the legal scholars who thought that this was wrong and said, yeah, let the political process decide. But fundamentally, relative to Obama, I think he claimed he was a constitutional lawyer. So if he was, in fact, born somewhere else, he should have argued it. So yes, I will be doing some innovation here, breaking ground, as I've always had to do throughout my entire life on everything I've had to do to struggle to get what I've gotten. But this is in 10, 15 years from now, when, look, if Merrick Garland doesn't do it, it'll go to the appeals court and we'll win in the Supreme Court. It's black and white on this issue. The preponderance of case law clearly saying that a naturalized citizen and a natural born citizen cannot be discriminated has been over and over and over and adjudicated in the courts.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go ahead to the next clip. I'll have to look into that, you guys. Like I said, I don't know, man. I have to do my own research with that. I want to go into this part of the interview here where they start to discuss the controversy surrounding him inventing email. And I told you guys we were going to dive into this as well, because there have been other people. If you look up who invented email, you'll see a gentleman by the name of Ray Tomlinson credited for inventing email. He brings up Thomas Hayes. And then there's also that Times article that came out that credited Dr. Shiva for inventing email. So here we go. Let's get into the email issue here. And it is to say, like, I can confirm, obviously, I mean, I live here locally. I worked at MIT years ago. I can confirm, like, Dr. Shiva is very intelligent. Yes, he did teach at MIT. Yes, he did attend MIT. I can confirm all those things. I know those, from my own experience. But I want to get into the email issue because this is the one where there seems to be pushback from people saying that it wasn't him. So I want you to hear his side of the story here.
Because my programming skills were so good, Dr. Michelson, who's still there, he gave me another opportunity. If you go back to that period, women could only do 3 or 4 jobs. Or not could, but that's where they were restricted to: teacher, nurse, secretary, or housewife. So if you went into any institution like this medical college, women were typically sitting at something called a desktop. They had something called a typewriter. You may have used this. I used it to write my papers growing up. And on their desktop, they had something called an inbox, an outbox, big file folders. They would write a thing called a memo with a to, from, subject, very, very structured, with a carbon paper. You'd have to put a paper and you have to put a CC, etc. You had these pneumatic tubes in these rooms where you would write a memo. The doctor would come, typically dictate to the secretary. She'd write a memo, a draft would occur. The reason I'm sharing with you all, this was a very complex system. It was the inter-office paper-based mail system. Now, on those old computers, you could do simple text messaging. That's not what I'm talking about. I was asked to convert this entire system, inbox, outbox, folders, 100 different features. People can go to inventorofemail.com and they can see that as a 14-year-old. And I took on this challenge. I wrote 50,000 lines of code. with 8 kilobytes of memory. No one had ever done this before, translating every feature. Now you have to understand, the doctors in that hospital would come to me and say, why are you inventing this system? No one's going to use it. I really just love going to my secretary and using this inbox, outbox folders. The secretaries were fascinated. They became my customers. I had great respect for them. And we made up a list of every feature, and they said, Shiva, we're not going to move from this paper-based system to this until all of those features exist. Every single thing you see in every email system today. And that's what I did, Kim, and I named that system email.
Okay, let me just pause there. He goes on. I can already see some of the responses in the chat. You guys are hilarious. But he does go on. But I wanted to just pause there and say, for people who may be skeptical in reference to a 14-year-old being able to write code, I will let you know, having worked at MIT, yes, it has not been uncommon for people who are 16, 15 to come to MIT because they're just freaking geniuses, right? So that's not uncommon. It's not uncommon to run across those types of people there at MIT that can they just invent shit. Like MIT has a lot of money because they have so many patents, because so many things have been invented by not just professors and scientists and researchers there, but also students. So that's not uncommon in this neck of the woods. So let me let him continue. I don't know if you guys are fully believe this story still yet or not, but let me let him continue because there's more about this.
I came up with that term, a system never used before in the English language. Won one of the Westinghouse Science Awards, which was considered the baby nobles. It was written up in the local newspapers. When I came to MIT, the president of MIT, who was then the science advisor to Ronald Reagan, Paul Gray, I was elected student body president. He had a big event at his home. This is December of 1981. And by the way, when I came to MIT, they'd said, here's a guy who invented the first email system on the front page. So Dr. Gray said, it's truly unfortunate that the Supreme Court is not recognizing software patents. It was a problem, again, legislators not understanding innovation. But in 1980, what had occurred was that the Copyright Office had said you could use copyright law to protect software inventions. And that was called the 1980 Computer Software Act. So Dr. Gray said, Shiva, you should protect your invention. Now, I had no lawyers. My parents weren't PR people. I wrote away. There was no PDFs. You had to write for these forms. And it was not just simply putting a C with a circle around it, which a lot of people have denigrated that to. You had to submit all your code. It went back and forth. And on August 30th, 1980, a 17-year-old kid gets the first United States copyright, recognizing me as the inventor of email. I wrote the code, named it email, and have all of it, right? Now, the problem.
So that was the documentation there. Eric, if you have time, if you can try to find that online, and that way I can give people close up, that would help if you can find it. If not, don't worry about it.
The problem is I didn't do any PR. 33 years later, my dear mom is dying of pulmonary fibrosis, and a beautiful suitcase, Kim, she has all of this organized. The code, the computer code. Doug Emmett, the only journalist, the only honest journalist who, a friend of mine at Emerson, a professor there, said, Shiva, you invented email. How come you haven't spoken about this? Well, Doug Emmett, the senior editor, came by, went through all of it, and he wrote a very important article, front page on Times online website called Dr. Shiva Ayyadurai, the man who invented email. Smithsonian contacted me, and they said, oh my God, you have this treasure trove of materials. We would like it. The Computer History Museum contacted me. And it was only on so it was on February 16th, 2012, a beautiful ceremony is held in Washington. The Smithsonian received all these, and a young Washington Post reporter writes an article called Shiva Ayyadurai honored as the inventor of email. And that's when the proverbial shit hits the fan. And the proverbial shit hits the fan, and you have to remember, I'm now 40 years old. I've been at MIT, taught at MIT, won every major award at MIT, Fulbright scholarship, right? On the front page of MIT, inventing EchoMail, another company I did for automatically analyzing email, which we built into a $250 million company, which started from me getting the White House as my first customer, my second life with email. I was called Dr. Email. No one else has a problem with this, but the day it went into the Smithsonian, a racist scumbag historian by the name of Thomas Haig, who thinks he is the one who's going to own the history of email, calls me a fraud, a liar. Gizmodo, you may remember them from Gawker Media, writes an article saying this asshole, this dick, and another blog says this curry-stained Indian should be beaten and hanged. Unbelievable
This is not in 1952, Jackie Robinson. This is in 2012. And I never wanted any of this fame. Now I'm teaching a class at MIT for free, not like Elizabeth Warren, for $400,000, while I'm running Cytosolve, another one of my inventions.
Let me just pause here for just a second because there's something else I want to add as well. In science, people can get pretty cocky sometimes in reference to inventions. I've worked with, when I worked at MIT, I worked in obviously the science departments, right? So, and I worked in science departments at BU as well. But people can get really cocky, especially over like who invented what, and you know, is that person more intelligent? And like, some people don't want to hear this when I say it, but I said it at BU and I'll say it again. Science is actually can be very conservative in a sense that there is like this expected expectation from a certain group of people that oftentimes is not expected from another group of people, meaning that some people, you know, in science, and I saw this at MIT, although MIT has gotten better over the years, where it used to be just heavily male and they didn't even want to admit women. There's a lot of things, I can tell you, a lot of things that changed. But I like noticed some things. Some of the things I noticed was just like, it seemed like if something was invented by a white male, it was just automatically just like, oh, okay, yeah, of course. But there tends to be, and not just like an MIT thing, but a science in general, there tends to be more hesitancy when it is someone who is a woman or someone who is a man of color, and particularly a woman of color. There seems to be more pushback. And this is a problem in science. We've talked about it oftentimes when I worked at those institutions, that they have to change their way of thinking. They have to decolonize their mind. So we've talked about this before. So some of the racist attacks that he's referring to, that is actually not surprising to me.
Thousands of calls come into MIT saying, how dare this guy say he invented email? The ARPANET guys did it. Well,
the military,
here's
of course.
Yes,
it's always the military, right?
Complex.
Yeah.
Exactly. And you nailed it. And this is the issue. You got to understand, I was a model minority, which MIT loves. The liberal elites love to promote the model minority when they think you are part of their establishment.
And we're going to pause that part there and we're going to go into the next clip. That's actually a really good point that he makes there, how the liberal elite love you, the model minority, when you are a part of their establishment. The moment that you try to go against them, that's when they have issues with you. So I said the same thing about Keith Olbermann's attack on Cornel West. People loved Cornel West when he's a part of the Democratic Party. The moment he does what they consider to be stepping out of line, they have issues. We're now going to go to another part of that interview where he brings up the Postal Service and free speech. And I thought this part was very important. Am I on the third clip? See me? 1, 2, 3, 4, fourth clip. Where he brings up the Postal Service and free speech. And that part he made there he said about Elizabeth Warren, it's true. Like Elizabeth Warren, like these people make a lot of money. Some people make a lot of money teaching these classes, you know? Okay, yeah, go ahead and do that, Eric. I want to show people that image. I'll come out of the Zoom part. So Eric did find that document, so I do want to go ahead and show that up here. And here it is. Boom, bam, boom. So here's that document, guys. So it says Certificate of Copyright Registration. I'll make it bigger for you guys, as big as I can. Certificate of Copyright Registration. It says August 30th, 1982. Hope you guys can see this well. Title of this work, email. Previous or alternative titles, computer program for electronic mail system. Name of author, Mr. Shiva Ayandure. So that's his name. Created and write entire text of the computer program. So this is the document I did want to show you. And it says copyright claimants, Mr. Shiva, and it gave his address in New Jersey at that point in time. Then it said here, mail certificate to Shiva at 97 Bay State Road, Boston. So that's important too. So that shows you that was during the time when he was at MIT. So, and not everybody that goes to MIT stays in Cambridge. Some of them stay over on the BU side of that Boston Bridge, just FYI. So this is it. Just wanted to show this to you guys. So certificate of registration, of copyright registration. Okay. You got mail, Elvin. Yes. Okay. Let's go into this conversation here about the post office and its connection to free speech. I thought this was pretty interesting. I didn't know about this.
Let's go. I want to, this relates very closely with email. Let me just first address the email thing, and I want to dovetail this. That's all right.
Yeah.
The important thing was the email is, if you think about email between 1978 to when I invented 1978 and 1993, it was an inter-office application. You don't need the internet for email. You may remember we connected our own local area networks. And then after the web, the internet had existed, became much more accessible, point and click, which was the www protocol. Every person could have now access to email. Then you saw Hotmail and Gmail and all those kinds of things, right? Or AOL. So now email becomes a consumer application. Now in 1993, I had won my second life with email. Was I was working on my PhD on artificial intelligence technologies to be applied to a whole array of problems: face analysis, document analysis, ultrasonic signal analysis. And I realized that all these people are creating algorithms in their own little cubby holes, but I could create an Uber platform. And my thesis is called Information Cybernetics. I was working on this. In the middle of that, the White House, emails now become.
Oh, whoops. Thank you for letting me know that, Eric. Sorry, guys. I think I put the timestamp. There we go. Sorry. Post office.
Look, you guys are not in the business of just letters. You guys are in the communications business.
Right.
And when the founders created the First Amendment, they also created concomitantly the Postal Service, which was to give teeth to the First Amendment. And they created a police force that I could send you a letter and you could send me a letter. No one could interfere. That's how they made free speech equal free reach, which Musk is completely destroying. The founders had this concept. Everyone should be able to equally send a letter at a very simple price. Postal Service is quite an extraordinary organization. It is so interlinked with the First Amendment. A lot of people have forgotten this. So when I saw email, I said, this is really dangerous. Private companies, where everyone was getting free email accounts. No one was reading the terms of service, which said they own your emails. So I told the Postal Service, you should create a public email service. And this would be quite extraordinary because people could choose, like you choose FedEx or DHL, or you could choose Postal Service.
So what he's saying is that the post office actually has a connection to free speech in the sense that no one is supposed to intercept that mail between it going from the post office to your house or to your apartment or wherever it's supposed to go to, that no one is supposed to intercept that communication and take it away. And what he started to notice, I guess, over the years with email is that, like, whoa, anybody can see this. There were so many different ones, Yahoo and Gmail and all that kind of stuff that came about where other people could have access to that information. You sending someone an email that you thought was private and just between you and that other person actually has other eyes on it as well, not like the Postal Service. So he made the connection between those two. And that was something I never really thought about before.
They said, get out of here. You're a 29-year-old kid. What do you know about our business? We're bigger than Walmart. Don't you understand that we're never going to move to that? That makes no sense to us. 1997. 2011, the Postal Service is going out of business.
Yeah.
And I do a scathing article in Time with Fast Company. And I say, these guys are a bunch of morons. They don't have the same level of innovativeness as Franklin did. And they should really have absorbed my understanding. And that goes viral. The head of the Inspector General, Dave Williams, calls me, goes, Shiva, why are you attacking the Postal Service? He hires me, and I don't know if it was try to quiet me down. They give me $100,000 to do 2 analytical commission me. And I show them how the Postal Service can make $2 to $3 billion annually by offering a service like this. They do nothing. When I met with Trump, he did nothing with it. But the bottom line is.
So I wanted you guys to hear that part. So apparently he did bring this, according to him, he brought this idea to other people. And one of the people that he brought it to was to Donald Trump. And he said there was nothing done with it. Dr. Shiva, in the past, it seems like he's kind of changed his opinion about Trump. But Dr. Shiva in the past supported, or vocally at least supported Donald Trump. But he doesn't seem to be in favor of Trump anymore. I don't know what made him change his tune, but I do know he's running as an independent. And I think that's really interesting. But he seems to be more critical of Trump now.
That the private companies now own our physical email infrastructure. The founders never wanted this. And my thesis is like the Postal Service could become the bulwark infrastructure for mesh networks, which would support an equivalent of not only email, but also social media. Now, why is this important? Because encryption can be broken, but the simple law is that if anyone intercepts a communication in the Postal Service platform, it's a 22-year sentence in prison. That's far more important than any encryption that one person can break. And I still believe that is the ultimate solution. No one individual should own something like this, be it Elon Musk, and so this.
So this is a good point, you know, and I think he has like interesting ideas. I think that he's going to get into the criticism about Elon Musk and Twitter in just a second, but I do think that it might be a little bit easier if he were to explain these ideas to people, like when you're running for president, and we've said this in reference to Cornel West too, like, for people who are academics, sometimes when they're outside of that environment, that academic space, sometimes I feel like they don't know how to tailor their conversation and their language to just everyday peeps that are not a part of that environment. And I feel like if you're running for political office, particularly if you're running for president, I think he's going to have to find a way to get straight to the point. I don't know. I'm sorry. I think it's just something that, like, people who are academics that are running for office, they have to work on that. You have to be able to hit those points, I think, pretty quickly, right? And you have to realize who you're speaking to, because you're not speaking to like other academics. You're not speaking to people at MIT, and you're not speaking to other inventors. You're talking to Joe that works at McDonald's. Like, you're going to be talking to, I don't know, Susan, who works at the car wash down the street. Like, you have to find a way to tailor that message and make it short and concise and to the point. I'm going to let Kim say her piece here, and we'll go to the next clip.
It's a great idea. I think that I'm with you on that. I think that is potentially a really good solution, because, if the government, so this is where it gets tricky, right? So it seems like the solution would be that the government, the Postal Service, would run this email service, that they would give us email addresses, or we would, get them somehow from the post office. We would be able to exchange information with one another. Potentially, they could even create an equivalent to Twitter. It's like a town square. People can actually post their thoughts. So the problem is, you're going to have people say, oh, we don't want the government to have anything to do with that, because then the government's going to spy on us. The government's going to interfere. But the reality is that the government is bound by the First Amendment. They're really not.
There you go.
Mean, they could try, but they would get in trouble. The way they've been doing it with these social media companies is through the back door. They've been saying, well, we're not doing it. We're not doing it. They're doing it on their own. But then we find out they're pressuring them. And so that's why it's potentially illegal, but we still have to prove that in court with the various cases. But it's directly illegal if they do it. And we've got a government entity that's supposed to be delivering us our communications. The government's interfering. That would be directly an infringement, a violation of that First Amendment. So a lot of me does believe, actually, that, I know a lot of people don't believe the government is the solution, but in some cases, in certain scenarios, it's just like, I don't want private people owning roads, because then they're maybe going to tell me I can't drive on them, right? I mean, there are certain services, like the fire department, the police department, that I want the government to be in charge of, because it needs to be a service for all without discrimination.
And then we're going to go to the next clip. And that part that Kim mentioned about private roads, something I wanted to say about that is, yeah, if you go to like some of these other towns, like there are private roads, like especially here in Massachusetts, some of these towns here, there's like a private road that you just can't drive down that road because someone else owns it and not the state. So let's get into this piece here where he starts to talk about Twitter. I just want to double check something really quick. No, that should be 5919. Where he starts to talk about Twitter and Elon Musk, and he has some criticisms there as well. But let's go ahead and get into that. Oh, sorry, I'm trying to. I don't know why this isn't moving. Okay. I'm just going to go back to the other video where I was. Sorry. So 5919. Right about there. Okay. So let's go back in. And he's going to
the
talk
reason
about
why we
Twitter
can trust the guy from Ohio is because they're such pussies over there. They're not going to run away with the money.
What is
They
that?
have nowhere to run to because all they know is Ohio. It's tough.
Right.
Tough.
I don't know what that was, but that's just going to have to move out the way. Okay. Anywho. All right, here we go.
I go, this has nothing to do with it. I said, you guys violated federal law. Up until that point, Kim, I have about 300,000 followers on Twitter. And I'm a bona fide federal candidate because we moved our candidacy to a write-in campaign. You have to understand, we raised $2 million off Twitter. Twitter is the most important platform for politics. Instagram may be for celebrities. Facebook is for friends and families. But Twitter is the de facto platform. So I take my 4 emails, which are public property, and I say Massachusetts destroyed 1 million ballot images. Didn't say ballots. And it starts going viral. And I share the 4 emails with the Secretary of State's General Counsel, Michelle Tassinari, who's in that diagram.
So he's referring to when he ran against Elizabeth Warren, when Elizabeth Warren was running for re-election. That's what he's referring to.
Says, we don't have to say ballot images. That starts going viral. Suddenly I get taken down, never been taken down since 2007. I'm running for federal office, right? So I still have 60 days. And Reuters, another ridiculous organization, puts out a press release saying, Shiva Ayyadurai taken off Twitter because he was saying ballots were destroyed. You see, they left out the word images. And then a fact-checking organization does a blessing in disguise for me. They said, yeah, he's lying, but they say, we contacted the Secretary of State and they told us the government of Massachusetts contacted Twitter. And I go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Government, like you said. The reason sometimes it's good to have government own these things is government, the highest form of speech is political speech. So the government, according to that report, had contacted Twitter. So immediately I look for lawyers to file a First Amendment lawsuit. I'm still running for office in a federal U.S. Senate campaign.
Yeah, so this would have been even different if he were not running for office at that time. I know several people that have had their accounts suspended or removed on Twitter, and that shouldn't happen. None of those people, in my opinion, did anything wrong. But he was a political candidate and they removed him. And obviously it is true that Twitter is like the vehicle in reference to politics. When you look at the social media platforms, Twitter is that platform for the most part. And so they removed his account, which in a sense hurts him promoting his campaign. Imagine if that happened to anyone else. Imagine if Twitter removed Joe Biden's account tomorrow. Think about that for a second. So he had an issue with it. But the point that I'm trying to highlight here, this is going back to that particular election, because what this shows you is that even back then, Dr. Shiva had already called out the fact that they were removing people. The government was telling Twitter to remove people from Twitter before Elon Musk even started the Twitter files. He had already brought this to the attention of people, and you'll hear later on of some people like Elon Musk, and Tucker Carlson. He had already brought this up because it happened to him. Let's continue.
No lawyer wanted to take this, Kim. Why? Because the Secretary of State is a guy called Bill Galvin. He's known as the Prince of Darkness. He owns every freaking politician in Massachusetts, every judge. So I had to do this myself. I don't know law. I've never represented myself in federal court. I had to go study state action. I filed not only the lawsuit against the government. Remember, I filed against the government, not against Twitter. And in that lawsuit, I filed a PI, a preliminary injunction. Judges do not like to give PIs unless it's an emergency and you're likely going to win the overall lawsuit. So anyway, I go, I think October 15th, somewhere around there, into federal court. I was given the PI hearing, which itself is a big victory. I wrote to Tucker Carlson, who I call another name starting with an F. Okay, you can add it, okay? Because the reason I called him that is he claims to be a fighter for free speech, a patriot. This guy got everything I gave him. I said, Tucker, I have the most important lawsuit violating free speech. Then on October 15th, me and the judge cross-examine the social media director of the Secretary of State, the government of Massachusetts. The judge says, how did you decide to throw Dr. Shiva off? Why? He goes, oh, he was spreading misinformation. What was the misinformation? He was saying ballots were destroyed, which I didn't say. I said ballot images. Nonetheless, the judge says, so what did you do? She goes, well, we wanted this down. He goes, what did you do? Well, we contacted Twitter. He goes, how did you do that? He goes, we have a portal, the partner support portal. He goes, what's that? He goes, we get VIP treatment. And he goes, really? And he goes, what did you do? He goes, we informed that he needed to, this needed to come down. And he goes, what happened? This is all in transcript, Kim. And we had it up on winbackfreedom.com.
So this is the same information that was revealed during the Twitter files, that they did have that portal and that government agencies were able to contact Twitter and ask for certain executives to remove certain people. So it's just, to me, and what's interesting to me, and he goes on to talk about this more, if you can imagine, that he brought this up apparently to Tucker Carlson, and Tucker Carlson apparently didn't really care to hear about it then. This is Dr. Shiva's words, not my own, but let's go on. No. Okay, I don't know. Yeah. Let me just go back to where I was. Okay. Yeah, I just need to go back to the timestamp. So 1:14. So you guys are listening to this, and then just let me know what you think on the poll, because that is the poll question. So go ahead and answer that if you haven't had a chance to do so. All right, here we go. Now, here's where he gets more into what happened with other people that he reached out to in reference to what Twitter was doing at that point in time.
I brought you guys, there's one word, freedom. And that's what I remembered. I wasn't willing to sell out. Now, all of that stuff was out there, and we're screaming to all these people who claim to be conservatives to help us. They did shit. Fast forward to October 28th, 2022. Musk is saying, let this sink in. Bullshitter, Maximus. And I put out a post on Facebook. I said, Elon, if you want to talk about free speech, call me. The backdoor portal exists. Are you going to take it down? Go review our lawsuit. The next day, Kim, like timing, The Intercept, which is a government front end, okay, puts out a news story. Oh my God, DHS leaks. We found this backdoor portal. They literally plagiarized one piece of the lawsuit, which is called a limited hangout, which I've came to find as a CIA technique, where you take a little piece to quiet the masses down. Then fucker Carlson puts Lee Fang on his TV show. And we have all the transcripts. He goes, oh my God, Lee, how come everyone ignored this? You fucking ignored it.
I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say, you guys, except for yikes.
Fucker Carlson ignored it. He's an actor. So what happens? So I get put back on Twitter. They thought I would be a good house slave, bow down to Musk. So the first tweet I do gets around 20 to 30 million views. I go, Elon, why don't I become your Twitter CEO since you're looking for one? I invented email. I got all the credentials, and I stand for free speech. That goes viral. The next day, I said, Elon, are you going to take down the backdoor portal? I do. So if you look at my tweets in December, 4 tweets on that. Clayton Morris from Redacted, in a big Twitter Spaces, he said, Elon, Dr. Shiva's lawsuit discovered this backdoor infrastructure. Are you going to remove it? And how do you reconcile that with your position as a free speech absolutist? He goes, ooh, that sounds like Big Brother. I'll get back to you. Complete acting. Nothing happens. And then I start escalating my tweets, Kim. The next January, 15 tweets. Elon, are you going to take down this fucking portal? Here's all the data. And my impressions go from 500,000 views per day down to 300,000, now down to 10,000 views.
You guys know I'm going to look this up on Twitter, right? You guys know I'm going to search Twitter to see if these tweets went out.
Because I was attacking this fool. And you have to understand, if you're really going to be sincere about it, where Elon Musk begins and where government ends, nobody knows. The guy's invented nothing. He's a creation of Silicon Valley, because Vijay Gadde and Jack Dorsey were open fascists. They would say, oh, you're talking about vaccines, you're gone. But Silicon Valley and Congress are like this. Why? Because a social media platform gets a 10x on valuation of revenue. A publishing company like the New York Times gets a 2x. So if the New York Times makes $1 billion, they're only worth $2 billion. But if Twitter makes $1 billion, they're worth $10 billion. Who came up with these valuations? Well, Twitter was given this valuation on a social media platform for the simple reason they got Section 230 indemnity. You can't sue a social media company. You can sue the New York Times. So because they're preventable from lawsuits, they get a higher valuation.
And I'm going to go ahead and stop it there. Very interesting things there. These are definitely some things that I think we need to think about. There are some things that I have questions. I got questions. I got 21 questions. Remember that song, babe? Yeah. Anywho, yeah. I mean, it just 50 Cent said 21 questions. Jay-Z said 99 questions. I have some questions. I really do. It's a lot to take in. But I will also say that I'm curious in reference to if these things happen prior to the Twitter files and all of this was ignored, then that really makes me just kind of sit back and think, did they really care about free speech, or just only when it suited their pockets? Or did they actually want the credit for it? Like, did Elon Musk really care about free speech, or did he just want the credit for it? I don't know, man. But how did you guys feel in reference to him being a candidate? One thing I will say, I think he should have talked about his platform more. I heard a lot about like what he accomplished, but he's running for president. I think he should have talked more about policy, what he plans to do, and what his intentions are in reference to his political campaign. But you guys voted. How do you feel? Eric, I'll go ahead and put the poll up here if you're ready. All right, so we have 608 votes. How do you feel about Dr. Shiva's campaign as an independent candidate? 18% said hopeful, 12% said somewhat hopeful, 26% said not hopeful, and 44% of you said haven't decided yet. Yeah, and I think the reason why I think the majority say haven't decided yet is because he didn't talk enough about his presidential campaign, and he is running for office. So I think the next interview that he does, I think he needs to focus more so on his campaign. Thank you, Kiss a City. Bring Shiva on for an interview. I can try to do that. Thank you for the super chat, Fan Thomas. Shiva is a lackey for people like Giuliani and Bannon, known as a bomb thrower who supports insincere people, satellites around right-wing media personalities. I would question even air he breathes. Interesting. Delthea says he has good ideas, but his personality needs work, a lot of work. Bryce says, I like this guy. Wow, this is interesting. I don't think I've ever seen the chat so divided. You guys, there's mixed views in the chat about Dr. Shiva. I'll take the comments on Rockfin. Then we will bounce. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Did this guy say that he was not born in America and he wants to run for president? Did I hear that right? Because if so, he can't be president. Look, I'm going to have to look into all of this, right? And thank you for the tip, Snork. Two Secretary of States had to have hearings to be eligible, but had to be stripped of ability to become president. Interesting. Well, I don't know, guys. I don't know. But I'll try to see if I can get Dr. Shiva on and focus. I want to focus on like his campaign, like where he wants to go with that. I think the campaign ad, I think he did a good job with the ad. But what was funny to me is when he said the establishment, and you notice it had Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton as the establishment, and people who are also establishment but pretend not to be, and it showed TYT and Vaush and all of those people. I think that's very, very, very important to highlight. I'm just keeping it real. Anywho, all right, guys, that is it for me tonight. I definitely went over time. I am off tomorrow. I'll be back on Thursday, keeping it reals. Other than that, guys, I got to go. Bryce says I'm going to have to clarify. Oh, man. That's it, guys. That's it for me. Have a good night. Keep up the fight.